Thanks, Phil. All right. Welcome to the July 13th, 2026 Statewide 911 Advisory Board meeting. Start with a roll call. Michael Yoakley is present. Senator Neil Anderson. Senator Bill Cunningham. Representative Mike Coffey.
Here.
Representative Angie Guerrero Cuyar. Heather Butler.
Present via WebEx.
Ralph Caldwell.
President Springfield.
Damon Dade. Laura Daly.
Present WebEx.
John Ferraro.
Present DuPage.
Tim Hightower.
Present WebEx.
Anthony Isla.
Present WebEx.
Bill McCarty.
President Springfield.
Sam McLaren.
President Springfield.
Randy Merritt.
President Springfield.
Nino Purdue. Deb Piscola. Carla Red.
Present via WebEx.
Kareen Switek.
Present DuPage.
Melinda Wilker.
President Springfield.
And Linda Zerwin. Okay, have a quorum. First item on the agenda is the approval of the June 15th, 2026 meeting minutes. Were there any edits to the meeting minutes?
Motion to approve, Ralph.
Thank you, Ralph.
Second, Melinda.
Thank you, Melinda. All in favor of approving the minutes, please signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Minutes are approved. Next item on the agenda is any legislative update. I just wanted to make sure everybody has seen the veto calendar. I believe it's the 3 days, the full week before Thanksgiving, and then the 3 days, the first week of December. I think it's the 1st through the 3rd. So just for awareness only, I'm not tracking any new issues, but just always like to be aware of the calendar. Next up is Alicia's update.
Good morning, everyone. On the NG 911 front, the ORT for the Springfield ISD Comms Get Center is scheduled for this week, with the go live scheduled for the week of July 29th. The remaining comm centers have ORTs and go live scheduled out beginning in August until April of 2027. So we'll be providing updates and new SIP transfer numbers for them as they cut over.
Can I insert a little update right there?
Yes, please.
Okay, just for awareness, the go live of the 29th is in question right now, but we've talked to the team and everything, and we do not believe it's going to impact the total schedule, likely just the go live of Springfield, but we're going to try and keep everything else on track, and we'll give updates as they're available. But right now, that target is likely not going to happen, and we're going to be probably pushing a couple close together so we can stay on track for Pontiac next. So that's it.
Excellent. As far as GIS goes, the plan for a statewide migration to version 3 of the NENA GIS standard is nearing completion. We've incorporated feedback both from the GISA GIS committee and also from the NG service providers, and the migration process is being laid out right now, and we're going to utilize as much auto formatting features as we can in the process to help ease the workload on the local agencies. And training materials and workshop topics are being developed to support the local data maintainers in achieving full compliance with the updated standard. So more to come on that. Regarding the redundant network connections, 38 orders have been completed and 15 orders are currently in progress. Regarding text to 911, 109 PSAPs have received text ready notices from Intrado, and 160, pardon me, my number is off there. 167 of the 168 PSAPs are able to receive text to 911. Regarding telecommunicator and telecommunicator supervisor training and certification program, the LMS RFP is currently with the state procurement office, and all 17 modules have been reviewed with the training professionals, resulting in a final list of modules. So the content is there. We are currently doing a side-by-side with the content in the newly released updated training standards released by APCO and NENA. So we're making sure that we are still in compliance with the standards, and then it will be complete. Regarding CESA, implementation continues. 168 PSAPs have been assigned a cohort. So for the first 3 cohorts that incorporate 50% of PSAPs, they are in progress or have completed implementation. The remaining half of the PSAPs were assigned cohorts with intended kickoff dates before the end of 2026. We have cohort 4 with a kickoff scheduled in mid-August, cohort 5 with a kickoff scheduled for mid-October, and we have a third cohort that we're calling 4.5, which is made up of some unique structured PSAPs so they can be worked together in small groups to move through the implementation process. Currently, 27 PSAPs have completed implementation and are actively transferring calls. 55 PSAPs are in active implementation, and 15 are scheduled to go live in July. Any questions?
Alicia, it's John in DuPage. So
Yes.
I had a few members of NENA question or were wondering, has the decision been made yet on the grandfathering of existing classroom training? For example, NENA's TCC or APCO's or Priority Dispatch's 40-hour. Is that going to be considered? Does that meet the requirements, or has that decision not been made yet?
That is going to be taken to the Public Safety Training Committee that's outlined in the administrative rule. Right now, the intent is that that committee will review existing training programs, including those that are being used, and issue that approval.
Okay, so it's up to the, as I understand it, what you're saying is the decision, or it's already part of the rules that the committee will review it, and if it's acceptable and the committee says it's acceptable, then it will count towards that requirement.
Yes.
Okay, great, thank you.
Not hearing any other questions, we will move on to the question that was presented to me, which was our, pardon me, are drones as a first responder an allowable expenditure of surcharge funds? Michael sent out an email advising that I was looking for advice and recommendation of the board. So I open it up and welcome your input.
This is John in DuPage. So as we know, Linda Zerwin is not here today. She meets with her Big 8. They had some comments. These are, Linda had asked me to present these to the committee, but these don't necessarily reflect my views, just in the spirit of all points of view being heard. I wanted to make sure that I read them for her. So the Big 8 says that generally they had the following comments. Yes to drone as a first responder program can be allowable. There's a difference between allowable cost and whether or not the local ETSB approves it or not is up to the local ETSB. They feel that it needs to be tied, if it's going to be allowable, it needs to be tied to a 911 dispatch and launched as a response to the request for service. They also had some discussions about its involvement with Real-Time Information Center. Overall feeling was that there is a portion of RTIC that works in concert with the PSAP. And so those were their comments, basically that they think it's an allowable as long as it's tied to 911 operations. I have my own comments, but I did enough talking, just giving you Linda's, so I'll take a break.
Okay, thank you.
This is Sam. I'm curious, what other jurisdictions are doing? Do we have any knowledge of that?
There are jurisdictions within Illinois currently using the drone as a first responder program.
Well, I mean, other states and how they're handling it as a surcharge.
I have not been able to find another state that said one way or another on it.
I see.
This is Carla Red out of Rockford. Can you advise what other municipalities or what other cities are using the DFRs?
Which system?
Which
Do we
systems
know?
are using?
No,
I know
which cities?
which cities are using them.
Through as part of the, or using funding, I would say, from their E ETSB.
That is not known.
So we don't know if there's other cities that are using
If they're using surcharge
ETSB
for it.
funding, yeah, if they're using funding to fund their drones or E ETSB funds.
Correct.
All right, thank you.
This is Melinda. I don't have anything prepared, but I don't feel like this should be used. Surcharge funds should be used for this. We actually had a request. We have a couple of different law enforcement that use the drones. But it's more of a camera or, things like that to assess whether, I mean, it's a response. So 911 doesn't, I don't feel it falls under the category of allowable surcharge for what the state shows or even maybe what the FCC shows. Until, I'd rather not be the first state to test whether or not we should be spending money on drones. So that's some of my 2 cents.
This is John Ferraro in DuPage. I agree in part with that. So, this is sort of a brand new topic, and obviously we have to see how this all evolves. But in general, I think drones could be seen as police cars and fire trucks. And we all know that we're not going to use 911 surcharge money on police cars and fire trucks. It's a response unit. So as far as the hardware itself or paying for the drones, I agree with Melinda. I understand what she's saying. In terms of how it integrates with the 911 center, I think those costs should be considered and approved because it definitely can assist 911 in doing a better job. There's intel that can be gained from drone as first responder programs. So as it relates to 911, those costs could be covered. The actual hardware or the actual drone, I see as a police car or fire truck. Thank you.
Thank you.
This is Ralph. First of all, I want to thank you for this process because I think this is how it should be. This is an advisory group and to help advise on what, the questions come up on advise or on allowables in the past. I'm not so sure that it's happened that way. So thank both of you for that and the state police as a whole. There are mixed emotions on this when we had a conference call with APCO and Nina. And I think where we landed, like Melinda said, it's too early really to tie this into 911. And we're not so sure that it falls underneath the FCC's guidelines as well. One day it may develop into a tool or resource, eyes and ears for a dispatcher, which could transmit that through the radio to police and fire and EMS responding to a scene. But I think it's too early to jump on and say this is allowable. So I think where we stand is presently buying drones should not be allowable unless it gets fully developed and the FCC agrees in the future that it should be allowable. So I do have mixed emotions. It's a tool that could help our dispatch centers if it's tied into our calls for service, if it's automatically dispatched. for the call, and we can see victims and we can see suspects and things like that to help save lives. That's a little different than the early adoption right now of drones. I think if you have the money and you want to do it without surcharge money, run with it. But as far as surcharge, I think we need to wait and see what happens maybe in the next year or two, because technology changes every day, and maybe it will be part of a dispatch center in the near future. But I just think it's a little early.
Thank you.
This is Carla Red again. Just let me add, because I heard what was said in regards to being tied into dispatch. There are, just for education purposes, that DFR program, there are certain calls that you can allocate that the drones will automatically deploy to. So I just want that to be out there so everyone is aware that technology does exist as well.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Chief. Yeah, we're aware of that also. There's certain communities already using that. But even with that said, I think surcharge, we should hold tight on that and not necessarily mark it as allowable.
No, I understand that. I don't know if that was understood by everyone across the board. So it was just an information piece from me.
Thank you.
This is Phil. I have the same general concerns that everybody else has expressed. One of the main things is I didn't see where it fit in the framework of the FCC guidelines. Now, with that being said, the integration into the PSAP and things such as that, this is a very new process and a very new program. And without a doubt, it's going to take continuous review, because there is going to be integration in the PSAP. And where that line is not clear, as with every line is. It's very clear to say what a fire truck is and a police car is. But after that, and we're probably going to head down that same path with drones and whatever the next thing is. As we're funded today, I'm not real comfortable with that, but that's also, that local jurisdiction's probably making those decisions too, but I just don't see how it fits using that whole term, drones. There probably is some integration in the PSAP that is directly related to that 911 call and that response to that 911 call, but I think maybe the processes need to be fleshed out a little bit clearer in the future when we know a little bit more.
Thank you. Is there anyone else on WebEx or in
Yeah,
page?
Alicia, this is Heather.
Go ahead.
Alicia, this is Heather on WebEx. I just want to share, I had some of the similar conversations with others as well that came to me when I pushed this out. Sharing, like John said, it's looked at equipment as a responder. The comment was made to me is we don't pay for our officers or firefighters or the fire trucks or police cars, so why would we pay for a drone? But maybe we could look at the interface. But on the same hand, like others have said, I think it's too new. We need to learn more about this before a decision is made. We're barely funded as it is. So adding this on, I know, many of us speak to local control, but some still struggle with that. And if an agency comes to them pushing for payment on this, it's a hard no to say if the state is saying it is allowable. So I agree with many of the others. I think there's too many unknowns. There's concerns out there. We need to see more on it before a decision is made.
Okay, thank you.
Alicia, this is Karina DuPage. Speaking with our groups, there was a lot of concern due to us requesting or looking at an increase in state surcharge funding as it is, and then utilizing money for different programs that are coming up. With that being said, there was definitely a desire and a need to stay at that cutting edge because it was clearly believed that we have not done that so far, and that there is a need to, drones are out there, so we need to be on that side of technology and make sure that we are funding that appropriately. It's just a question as to if now is the right time, and do we want to confuse that in terms of allowing it at a time that we're looking for more money when we're not being funded correctly? Are there other ways to fund it with outside sources? However, there is a need to stay technologically current, which it was believed that we kind of have not been. So not sure if that's helps, but that was overwhelming feedback from my group.
Thank you. All right, thank you, everyone. I truly appreciate your insight and your recommendations. There will be more guidance coming out regarding it. Moving on to NG 911 grant topics for the fiscal year 28. I would like to make a call for any input or ideas to be brought back for the August meeting for discussion. Ideally, we can identify those sooner rather than later so that we can have some discussions around them. Specifically, we are looking at where PSAPs are in that true NG environment, receiving the I3 information. If you'd like to speak to those you represent on the board, where are the gaps at? There are gaps out there. Some PSAPs, yes, they made the jump to the EZNet, but they may not have the full functionality within their call handling equipments yet, or different pieces. So please reach out to your constituents and get some ideas of what people are looking at, what people need to move into that true NG environment. Another piece I'm looking for specific input on is GIS project, where we updated the submission schedule. I know that there are systems out there working diligently to ensure they are meeting the standard and the timeliness of the update. Focuses on what kind of GIS support we can provide within the grant topics specifically would be appreciated.
Alicia, this is Phil. Just as a point of reference, since you brought it up, I think we have to look at a funding process that'll permanently fund GIS and not fund it through the grant process. GIS is not going away. It's going to be it's a foundational function. Foundational function of how NG works, and funding something that is a foundation via a grant process that is tied to legislation. That's not sustainable. I think that thing, obviously it's in this, we're going to talk about it here in a little bit in the strategic plan. But we have to find a process to have sustained funding for GIS, not just this grant for this year. I mean, because that's not a good model for budgeting processes either. So I just want to put that out there. Thank you.
Okay, and that's all I have for my update.
The only thing I want to add to what Phil just mentioned is we can have a discussion as a board with regard to, are there things related to GIS that the board thinks that either state police or through Alicia's line, we should be funding statewide. So I agree with what you're saying, Phil, and I think that if we think on a statewide level, then we can have a conversation as a board about, are there things that we can do for the entire state that we fund from either line. I'm not sure which one, or if you have an opinion about which line that comes from, to address exactly, I think, what you're talking about, Bill.
This is Melinda. Yeah, I just would, one of the things that would be very helpful, and I know this is a process, and I think we've come a really long way with the submitting our data and get it in the process. The more we can automate that process, especially once we get in the version 3 or whatever, if we can just, if our changes can just be automatically updated, and I know it's going to take some time to get Esri to do this, but I think we'd go a long way in putting some money toward that and helping everybody ease the process of the GIS update.
Yes,
that would be very.
And that is one of the top goals going into fiscal year 28, and automating that migration to version 3 as much as possible. With the tool, it can do a lot of things on the back end and not put it on the local maintainer. So yes, that is definitely a priority. That being said, there's also real benefits to having the data maintained locally because you know your area the best, you know the new streets, you know the new subdivisions. So yes, we're focusing on trying to balancing that with as much automation as we can.
Okay, thank you.
This is Ralph, and if we are going to do a statewide effort and it costs more, I would suggest waiting for a surcharge increase before we start taking more funds from our monthly checks, because right now some of us are struggling to get by. So if we are going to change how we do business, and now if it's a reduction, obviously we could do that at any time if there's no impact on our monthly checks. But if for some reason prices go up because we're doing a statewide effort, we should time that right. Then another thought on some of the grants. I know originally the grants for like a one-time purchase, let's say a phone system on-prem or a recorder on-prem, everything's going to the cloud now and subscription based. And I don't know that we have our arms around that. How do we cover subscription based moving forward? Because if we no longer have on-prem equipment in our centers and we can't get grant monies to replace our phone systems and our recorders, well, then, you know, that could be an issue moving forward. And initially we were able to get phones and recorders. And if you have a capital replacement plan, eventually you need to replace those. So the question is, when are we going to open the door again to get a new phone system at your center that needs to be replaced and a new recorder? So I think those are the things that we should discuss or think about in the near future.
I agree. Okay.
Good.
Yeah.
Okay. The next topic on our agenda is the strategic planning update. I will turn it over to our colleagues with ISI in just one second. Basically my plan for today is a walkthrough, and I know that there's a PowerPoint, and I'll let them handle that. But I just wanted to give the board a kind of an understanding of where I think things are for the strategic plan as we go through this. I think with a month between today's meeting and our August meeting, hopefully there'll be plenty of time for thorough review, feedback to be submitted, so we can collect that. But I anticipate that August meeting may be a little bit more lengthy in duration as we work through the strategic plan. And the reason for that is I'm still very hopeful we will get the plan finalized in September. And in order to do that, I think that's going to probably necessitate a more lengthy August meeting. And the other thing is that we potentially will have the need for a second September meeting. And I think there's time to do that because our October meeting won't be until the third week. We right now have our scheduled meeting for the September 14th. If we need to squeeze another meeting in, I think there's time to do so to get things finalized. And what I would like is then the October meeting being partnered with the IPSA conference, the ability to present the strategic plan at IPSA, at the board meeting at the conclusion of IPSA. I just wanted to give everybody an idea timing wise, what my plan was, and give you all an opportunity to tell me if you have concerns with that. So throw that out there, let you all mull that over, but I will turn it over to ISI at this point.
Michael, before you get going on that, do you have a second date in September that you wanted, that you're earmarking so that we can at least pre-plan and maybe mark it on our calendars?
Yeah, I thought we might talk about that today. But since I hadn't told you any of this until today, I didn't know if you wanted me to jump right to that. With that meeting being September, the middle of September, I was looking towards the end of September, and I'm sorry, I'm trying.
The 28th, because we're on the 14th scheduled.
Yes.
So 2 weeks from that would be the 28th.
Yeah, because the 28th would then give us plenty of time to get copies printed and whatnot and everything for distribution at the October board meeting. So 28th, or I would say at the latest that following Monday, that first Monday in October. So maybe as we walk through things, think about that. We can discuss it. We don't even necessarily have to finalize it today. If we can, great. But yeah, I'd like to tentatively get that on everyone's radar because I think that presenting the plan in October would be a really good approach, in my opinion. So, oh, and as a reminder, I said August will be a more lengthy meeting. I will be conducting the board meeting from DuPage in August. We will have the Springfield side available, but just for everyone's awareness. So, sorry. Anything else before I turn it over to ISI?
Yes, when you say Springfield, are you talking here?
Yes.
Literally this?
Yes, this site
location?
will still be available.
Thank you.
Corinne and John and DuPage are good with September 28th if you're looking for info now.
Okay, thank you. ISI, you're up. There's microphones on the table there. PowerPoint? Sure.
All right.
Okay.
Okay, if you go to the next slide, please.
Sure.
So everyone should have received the draft plan. It's bound just like this. And what I wanted to walk through real quick is just an overview again of basically how we got here. So again, engaged, lots of outreach throughout the state occurred. We had face-to-face, we had surveys, we had one-on-one interviews to collect what are the things that we should look at, what are the opportunities to improve from the voice of 911. That's what we captured. And the reason I'm going through this right now is the plan looks overwhelming and complicated, but it very much is a synthesis of the information that we've already provided in the workbooks and in other discussions. So I don't want to make it seem more complicated than it is. So again, lots of engagement out there. We took what we heard and we synthesized it down to 8 focus areas. And that's and the third bullet point there, the structure 8 focus areas and 19 goal groups. We then want to spend time with you, the board, to validate that we captured the voice of 911 and articulated it in the plan as you see reasonable from an implementation perspective, because the strategic plan very much is intended to be a roadmap for implementation, not just a white paper. Okay, so we do want to constantly challenge ourselves and say, yes, this is implementable and the roadmap that we laid out is reasonable. So if you flip to the next page, this is how to read the plan. Again, it may look overwhelming as you go through it, but I want to hopefully simplify it a bit today. So we talk about number 1 is where Illinois is today. That's the term that you'll see in the plan, and the term that we use frequently is the current state. Okay, and for each of the focus areas, you're going to see that. And again, as we go through the 8 focus areas, I want to make sure that you understand that the layout is identical. So if you do the first one, you should be able to flow through the other focus areas without feeling like you're trying to re-understand what's being presented. So that's the current state. And then within each focus area, we provide a future state, and that's based on the voice of 911. Where do we intend to go to from a performance or a capability perspective? And that's what the third one is, how we'll get there. And that's through that 3-year plan. We have very specific milestones across the 3 years of the plan. And again, we want a lot of feedback from the group on whether or not that was staged right and to confirm that it's achievable. And then the fourth one is measures of progress. So again, we do want to make sure that we are identifying quantitative abilities to measure progress as we move through. And if we flip to the next page, again, these are the 8 focus areas. Again, none of these are new. These were in the workbook. So as we're going through the actual plan in just a minute, Seth will be doing that with me. Again, there are 8 focus areas that we'll be talking about today. Okay. We are flexible, but our thought was to re-present the plan as it's in the binders that we handed out today, not necessarily to wordsmith and change things, but just make sure that everyone leaves today with an understanding of what's in the plan, how it's presented, and where we're looking for feedback. And please, I'll pause for a second because I want to make sure that if anybody has any questions, please, this is intended to be a bi-directional discussion. Okay, so, and Sep and I have talked quite a bit about this, and what we want to also do is make sure that we're efficient with the board's time. Okay, so one proposal that we have is we'll review the plan today. We would like you to go back home and dig through it, write your notes on it in whatever way is most efficient for you. We are proposing that that we hold one-on-one sessions with each board member. So you can tell us, go page by page, tell us your comments. We'll capture that. We'll aggregate it across the entire board. And then in that next board meeting, instead of, it'll be a place to start. So instead of going around at that point saying, okay, what'd you think, what'd you think, what'd you think? It's, this is what we heard. And let's talk about it as a team and figure out what we want to do with it. I'm trying to come up with ways to efficiently use the board's time. Are you okay with the one-on-ones?
Well, I have a question in terms of, are you prepared for us to, as we walk through it today, are you prepared for us to have conversation about overarching topics? I'm going to be honest, I did a deep dive this weekend, and I have a list of things that I would like to discuss to make sure that everybody is on at least somewhat the same page in terms of, there were just things as I read through it that I really want to get fundamentally agreed upon before we even move forward. Does that make sense?
Yes, 100%.
Okay.
And again, no problem. We'll update it as we need on that feedback. And again, what I'm completely flexible on is if you feel that one-on-one interactions for us to aggregate that and then use that as a starting point in our next board meeting. If that's better use of your time, we're just putting that on the table. We're fine with that. Yeah, don't need to answer it now, but if you'd like to, go ahead.
Yeah, I'd like to. I think there's more gain on us talking amongst ourselves together versus one-on-one, because I have no idea Michael's comments or my comments or Melinda's, and then we'd almost have to rehash it again. So I think it'd be quicker if we were all in the same room or a WebEx or whatever, discussing some of these things so that I can jump off of Mike's questions or concerns, Michael's, or he can jump off of mine. If you're looking at saving us time, I think that's a faster project than individually, because I still think we have to come back together. I'll have no idea individually what Phil's saying unless you give me a draft of everything you talked about, Phil. And now we're talking about Phil's comments twice. So, but that's up to the rest of the board.
We can go either way. We're just flexible with what I'm putting on the table.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying, Ralph, because we do have a lot of good conversation as a board, and I think that we'll say things to each other that it's like, okay, I didn't think of it that way, or I'd like to hear a little bit more about that. I guess what I see as is we can't collectively do a WebEx, unfortunately, because of Open Meetings Act. Between now and August, summer is, more and more difficult to get time in. So I don't know that we're going to have an opportunity until the August board meeting. And so I guess in my mind, that's why I was envisioning August is going to be a lengthy meeting, because I think we're going to need time to do all of that brainstorming. Now, having said that, what I would say is if individuals put together some individual thoughts and shared them with ISI, that would probably be very helpful. I have my notes and I'm happy to share them with you, but I'm going to be honest. I don't know that I would want to just pass these out to the board, because I wouldn't want them misinterpreted, if that makes sense. Because I wrote them in Michael language, and sometimes, that doesn't always translate.
I appreciate that. No, what I was trying to be sensitive to was the short notice that we gave you to review this. So, and again, it's complicated. We were trying to present it in a way that was easy to go through. And so that's why it took a little bit of extra time. So, but we were trying to be sensitive. If anybody's prepared to talk about certain sections of it today as we review it, which we're planning on doing, perfectly okay. I just, whatever you prefer.
Okay.
All righty. So basically that's it. We can just jump right into it, the review of it, and we'll start going through the focus areas and anything else you want to talk about. But this document is what we're going to be going through next. Good.
This is John DuPage. While there's some silence here while they prepare the plan. I do agree with what Ralph said. I think there's more gained together. And then I also agree with what Michael said. If you have comments, independent comments, then get those over to ISI. I think that would be the most efficient way. I can't see if there were nodding heads, but Corinne, you agree with that?
I do, sir.
We both agree here in DuPage that that's a good plan. Thank you.
Okay, can we get this formatted to fit the full page?
Sure.
Does this mic work?
I don't know. And I just messed this up. So here we go. Give me 1 second. Oops. Is that good, or you want me to go smaller? Is that all right? Okay, hang on. I got to share. Okay.
All right, good morning, board members. The first page that we can look at is page number 2 on, can everybody hear me?
WebEx and DuPage, can you hear Seb?
Yes, we can.
Okay,
All right.
thanks.
So the first page we can look at is the table of contents. And over here, we can see the overall layout of what's presented in the plan. The plan begins with a letter from the leadership, which we'll have to work on still to get developed. Next, we will have the statewide 911 advisory board, and this is a portion of the plan that we'd like to dedicate to making the readers understand what the SAB is and what does it consist of. On pages 5 till 7, we have our mission, vision, and values. These are stemming from all of the workshops that we conducted with the board.
Do you want feedback as we go through?
Yes, please.
Okay, perfect. All right, back up on page 4. There's some terminology here that I don't know if it's what everybody else thinks, but like the very first sentence says, statutory body charged with advising on and coordinating Illinois 911. That's not terminology we use. Don't we say advising and coordinating on 911 in Illinois? It's not Illinois 911. Is that right? Okay. So just, and there's several terminology things I want to talk about as we walk through this. The second sentence, it is a statewide voice of a locally governed system. The term locally governed system is used throughout the entire plan. I'm not sure if that captures the reality of what it is, because it is not solely locally governed. Right? So
Yeah, can we say state and local?
right. I mean, well, I mean, at some level, there are federal guidelines that have that govern. You know what I mean? So like, that terminology throughout the document, I understand the sentiment, but the reality is there's governance from federal, state, and local levels. And like I said, that is quite a bit in the document.
There's specific areas where we get deeper into the weeds where it's clear it can be one or the other.
Yep.
But when we're overall summarizing, I think we got to find a group of words that frames it up, just like Michael said, because it points at many different directions. As we go later in this, that's where it's going to flush out to be different.
Noted. Thank you.
And Chairman Sam, I'm a little bit troubled by the term statewide, given that Chicago is independent.
Fair, Sam.
And then this is Randy, and I'll just tag on to what Sam said there. And it just, the statewide voice is, maybe not the right term to use either. While we do agree with what we present to the General Assembly as far as plans and policy, we're not always lockstep on the finer details of each one of those things. And so while we want to provide good data and information to policymakers, to say that we're all 100% on the same page under the same voice may not be accurate.
Noted. Thank you.
The first paragraph, it says the board operates under the ISP. I have a problem with that as well, because truthfully, each member is appointed by the governor. The membership is outlined within ETSA. The ISP doesn't really dictate the board.
And then from the carrier perspective, just as a history for ISI here, is when jurisdiction for 911 was largely transferred from the Commerce Commission to the state police, regulatory authority over carriers remained 100% with the Commerce Commission, not at all under the state police.
Good point, Randy. The second paragraph on page 4, the board doesn't, it's the wording. The board doesn't report to the General Assembly. We prepare a report to the General Assembly. I just want to be careful about that in terms of how it is worded, because it says the board reports to the General Assembly. As a matter of fact, we have 4 members of the General Assembly on the board. So, I mean, anyway, terminology doesn't work for me there. And then, sorry, y'all, I had a lot of free time this weekend. The Illinois 911 system is locally governed, but statewide in obligation. That doesn't work for me in totality, because 911 system means something completely different than I think what you're implying here. Yeah, I'm going to be honest, that sentence doesn't make sense to me. So I'm not exactly sure what you're trying to convey there. That's it on page 4.
Yeah. How do you recommend we word the mixture of some of the terming here with the locally governed system and then the statewide scope? Any suggestions on the wording?
I think that whatever we land on up above in terms of how it's governed by federal, state, and local control that at the end of paragraph 2, you need to say 911 in Illinois, again, while governed by various federal, state, and local guidelines. I don't know how you want to word it. And then I think what you mean, but statewide in obligation, I think that speaks to there's a responsibility for there to be 911 for everyone in Illinois. So maybe just say that under the purview of those various governing bodies. Because the last half of the sentence, I agree with. The SAB is the body that brings forth all the stakeholders to deliberate and determine direction.
Thank you, Michael.
On page 5, again, we have the use of Illinois 911 system, and then there's a reference to just system period. I think we need to be very careful because I think 911 system means something very different to all of us than what you're implying here. I think what you, in large part, what you often mean is just 911 in Illinois. Unless you're referring to something specific like the EZINet. If you're looking for
Maybe a simpler word to substitute in every now and then would be service as opposed to system.
911 service, noted.
My other note on page 5, the third bullet point at the bottom, the SAB setting statewide standards for service delivery, training, certification, performance measurement, and operational readiness. In my opinion, the board does not set standards. They advise on standards. I feel like I'm the only one who's going to be doing any talking today. I'm very sorry.
No, you're doing good. You found those. So, and we agree so far. You know, if we
Stop.
disagree.
Yeah, I know you will, Rob.
Yeah, we're definitely going to
Never
speak
mind. I
up.
didn't
So
mean
yeah, silence
to
is
say
good.
that.
Yeah.
All right, page 6, just again, right there at the top, Illinois 911 should be 911 in Illinois. So the last bullet point at the bottom, the public and general assembly understand the work of statewide 911 and support its continued strengthening. I think, again, this is a wording thing for me because when I think about statewide 911, I think about the Illinois State Police Division of statewide 911. So I think that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about the public and general assembly understand how 911 operates in Illinois, what the expectation of 911 is in Illinois. Because I think you're talking about 911 in totality, and then the continued strengthening of 911 in Illinois.
And then, could you repeat the first part on top that you said you had a comment on?
Oh, on page 6, let's see, it's the very first sentence. The statewide 911 advisory board's vision describes the future state of Illinois 911, the future state of 911 in Illinois. It does carry throughout. Yeah, I didn't keep repeating it. I promise. I don't think.
I do have just a few items here on 6 as well. The bullet points on strengthening this system means that, and then there's 3 bullet points in there that say every 911 system. Is that really is what you mean, every PSAP? Is that what you're saying there? Is that the intent? In the first, fourth, and second to last?
Do we think that's?
What do you mean by that? Is it PSAP? When you say 911 system, what's covered? No, I'm actually pointing the opposite direction. You need to refine it to what it really means, which is if it means PSAP, you should say PSAP.
Well, but
You got to ask that. I mean, HSD is a board that local board that governs the PSAP, I believe. Is that so? But 911 system could be, it's way too vague. It's too broad.
and I think it probably depends on the bullet point too. Because like if you look at the first one as it relates to funding, well, funding is issued to ETSBs. However, when you look at some of the other bullet points, like when you say every 911 system is protected by clear cybersecurity, in that case, you're probably referring to PSAPs. So I didn't catch that one, Randy. Thanks. But I think we are going to have to look at these and be specific, because the term, and we're learning this through the rulemaking process as well. The term 911 system can mean a lot of things. And so when you're talking about, you know, our vision, I think we do need to be specific about who that vision is for. It could be ETSBs, like I think in the first dot point, you know, like for example, in the third dot point, you say every 911 call reaches the right PSAP. Well, that's to me, that's the correct reference. But in terms of like cybersecurity, every 911 system, to me, that's probably PSAP again in the second to last dot point. Every PSAP holds the line through outages, disaster, and disruptions.
So more specifics on this page.
Yeah.
Noted.
And I'm sure we've talked, excuse me, this is Phil, I'm sure we talked about this in bullet point number 1. If I'm a legislator or somebody looking at this, like I look at like needs. I don't like that word needs. Every 911 system has funding it needs. I need a lot of things, but it also needs to be something that's realistic and achievable. And I don't, that's just, that word needs just turns me in the wrong direction immediately. I obviously have been involved in the process, so I understand what that means. But if I just open this and look that up, that's going to turn me off immediately, because I mean, I thought I needed cake for breakfast this morning, but I chose not to do that.
So would you say funding required?
Yeah.
Is that better?
Or maybe sufficient?
Sufficient funding?
Appropriate, sufficient, operationalized. I don't know. There's lots of
Yeah.
needs is not the one.
Or you could just take out needs, just say funding for current operations and documented capital plan.
Thank you.
Okay. I think I interrupted you when we were about through here, and I don't have anything again until page 11.
Anybody else, please feel free to stop us at any point. If you're looking for that feedback, we appreciate it. Moving on to page number 7, we have our values. Again, these are very similar to the mission and the vision that was developed from the workshops. On page number 8, we have the strategic plan development methodology, and we briefed it very quickly this morning as well. This is allowing the reader to understand how we got to this point and how the plan was developed. And we begin at the very top with engagement. We explained that 400 or more inputs were gathered statewide from telecommunicators, PSAP directors, ETSD administrators, technology staff, carriers, and statewide partners through interviews, surveys, and workshops. They were then synthesized into 86 improvement opportunities, and they were reviewed through working sessions with 911 subject matter experts, including those representing Illinois NENA and Illinois APCO. Those were then structured into 8 focus areas and 19 strategic goals that fall under those focus areas. And each of them will then have a current state, a future state, risk strategies, ownership, and measures of progress. And then lastly, we move into validation. And that would be the process that we are currently on. This plan is still in draft, and it will require a lot of your feedback to make sure that we get to that validation portion. Moving on to our executive summary, we explained that the plan is a 3-year progress, and we explained very briefly some of the information that stemmed from all of the engagements and the things that we heard on where Illinois stands today, the very brief summary. And then on the right side of that is where we want to be by 2029.
Step on the version, this is John on your page, just cosmetically, the version sent via email, page 8, the different headings are cut off.
Yeah, I made note of that. I wasn't gonna point it out because I thought I was being too picky. But if you look at what he's talking about there, Steph, is if you look at mine, which is what I on the screen, for some reason, now your printed version is fine, but when I was reviewing this, I caught the same thing. You see the headings are cut off for some reason. We just need to, when we get to finalize it, we need to figure out what's causing the difference between print and view.
Noted.
And this
Thank
is
you.
more, this is Ralph, this is more cosmetic also. On page 8, it's a beautiful picture of, it looks like police and fire chiefs in a meeting. Is there any way to tie it to the state of Illinois? I have no idea what state they're all from. These pictures are on page 9. I don't know if they're Illinois pictures or not, but it'd be nice to tie it in Illinois, maybe not another state. And I know that'll take a little extra time, but
Absolutely. One of the things that we can discuss is we can get the board in a room and take a picture of you all to include it in the plan. If you're interested, you can certainly do that.
So we actually just broadly had pictures like EFAP, things like that. So if people are up for that, we are 100% agree that it should be.
We can't hear, sorry.
Oh, there we go. Thanks. All righty. So we 100% agree. We wanted to use Illinois specific pictures from different PSAPs or the board or other places in this document, and we still are willing to replace it with Illinois specific pics. So however the board would like to just either approve our ability to go out and do that. Again, we'll get releases for the pictures and stuff. We're comfortable with that, but we agree 100%. We'd like it to be Illinois specific.
And not just Illinois specific, but the picture at the bottom of page 9, the one on the right, and the 2 picture frames, it's clearly downtown Chicago. That's wonderful, but we don't do Chicago. So maybe a picture of the state capitol building, something, something like that.
Yeah, the only thing I'll say about pictures within a PSAP is you're gonna have to be very careful in terms of, we have very strict guidelines. I'm sure you all have very strict guidelines in terms of taking pictures, and they 100% would have to be reviewed and approved, Not that it's doable, but from like our PIO perspective, every time we do something related to our comm centers, there are just rules and guidelines.
If someone can just reach out to us and let us know if you're interested, we have the releases and everything. So just reach out to us if you're interested, and we'll stop over. We've got a whole team that does this kind of stuff, pictures.
On the third bullet point, it talks about the infrastructure to sustain progress beyond 2029. When I think of infrastructure, I think of pipes and support of the system. It's going to be a lot more than just infrastructure. I see what that term means, but my simple mind, infrastructure is a lot of things that sometimes we don't see, but it's going to take policy, it's going to take training, it's going to take this cloud thing that Ralph mentioned earlier. It's going to take a lot. And maybe that word summarizes that a lot, but I think there's a lot to change between now and 2029. Super exciting.
Noted. Thank you. There's nothing else right now. We can move to page number 10. Now, the intent of this page is a very high-level overview of all of the accomplishments that have been made to this point. And so the plan is simply trying to state that we're trying to build upon all of the previous achievements. And we will need a lot of your feedback on this page. Anything that the board believes needs to be highlighted will probably be on this page. So if there's anything specific that the board can think of right away that is not listed here. There's nothing right now. We will be looking forward to receiving some of your feedback later. We can move forward to page number 11. These are the strategic plan priorities at a glance. And this page shows how the architecture of the plan is set up. As we discussed, there are 8 focus areas, and each of those focus areas have specific goals assigned to each of them. And on the right side, we can see that each of them has received year 1, year 2, year 3, as well as foundational actions. Foundational actions, as we see on page number 12, goes into explaining what these markers represent. So on page number, moving back to page 11,
please. Well, first of all, I want to say, at first glance, when I opened the document, I saw it was 42 pages long. I was a bit concerned. However, after having read the entire document, I will say, because we've never had a strategic plan, I think there's history in this one. I think there's setup in this one that is probably necessary. I just wanted to share that thought. I'm not sure if you guys had any sort of similar reaction, but I was a little concerned about the length. And again, my concern is purely about the fact that we want this to get read. So just a thought overall right there. So, and I know we're going to go through these, but when reading this list, I did have some thoughts. 1.2, modernize the funding formula and capital planning. I'm not sure that modernize is the correct word. I haven't come up with the correct word. We've looked at some other models. And in looking at some of the other models, what we found was the distribution of funds, even when we applied it to the various models used in other states, did not change greatly. So I think there may be things that are changed. I don't know. And if none of the rest of you have any issue with the term modernize, we'll probably skip that. But then I do have a couple things on 4.1 and 4.2. Establish a statewide cybersecurity and access control baseline. As it relates to what? You know, cybersecurity, 4.1, establish statewide cybersecurity and access control baseline. Specific to 911, right? And maybe that's implied, but cybersecurity, if you think about it, has implications from the vendors to the various systems used in the system, in the centers throughout the state, to cybersecurity that is managed by the Illinois State Police. And all of those are controlled by different variables, and our oversight to those also varies. It's a pretty broad term as stated.
So one of the things on that one, Michael, is what we were trying to say in regards to baseline is developing that and understanding very in depth what those carriers are, who are the providers, and what is that base level of understanding, and then building it from there statewide as it relates. So if you look at page number 24 in regards to that, I know we're skipping forward, but each year strives to build towards that. And in year 1, we discuss adopting a baseline. And each time we discuss the need for a baseline, we were saying that currently we might have a fragmented understanding. And so we can start by understanding that very clearly. And then year 2 and year 3 build upon that baseline and moves us forward. That is the intent, but
I I don't know if I'm articulating my point well. Cybersecurity as it exists, like if I just look at our centers, there are implications that relate to cybersecurity for the operation of our centers that don't relate to that are not 911. So I just want to be clear that when we're establishing these baselines, what we're talking about is as it relates to the delivery of 911.
Yeah, this is Melinda. Yeah, maybe for the access control baseline for the 911 infrastructure.
Something
I
like
don't
that.
like the infrastructure word, but in this case it might, because it isn't just 911, but it's kind of everything connected to 911.
Yeah.
Just one suggestion. I don't know.
Noted.
Like, I don't know, I'm going to be very basic here. I have cybersecurity as it relates to email within my, my center. That doesn't have anything, we're not going to advise and counsel on that. And that's one example. All right, I think I'm murdering the point. I'll shut up now.
Should be, this is Ralph, adhere to establish statewide cybersecurity baselines or best practices or something like that. Adhere to establish instead of establishing them because there's already baselines out there. Just follow or adhere. Or...
I think where we're going is we want to make sure there are baselines and there are standards as it relates to the delivery of 911. So somehow I think we need to wordsmith that and get it focused there.
This is Randy. It would help if we knew what the outcome was expected to be with regard to cybersecurity. I mean, it's an ongoing thing for everybody. I'm sure for every PSAP and for every state agency, for every one of our carriers, Commerce Commission, it's an ongoing thing that you're continually having to improve your cyber posture. And I don't know what the board is hoping to achieve on that point necessarily. We want certain, PSAPs to be able to adopt certain cybersecurity practices, or everyone to have a plan and insurance in some fashion, or I don't know what the end result is, but whatever that is, I think this should drive to.
So I think what we are, and maybe I'm wrong, but I think what we are going for is best practices. We can't make PSAPs do the best of the best on every level, right? Because they may not be able to afford it. But here's the baseline, and here are best practices. And so here are our recommendations as it relates to cybersecurity. Yes?
Yeah, to minimize risk as technology evolves, because we'll be getting pictures and videos and things
Right.
like that. It's not like this isn't going to be static, but to minimize the risk, best practices to minimize the risk for 911.
And this is Ralph again. We talked about statewide efforts. Maybe we need to pay for cybersecurity statewide in all our PSAPs, so we all have the same software, the same best practices. And if one county doesn't have enough IT folks or enough money to get the proper one, if we're all on the same page as far as protecting our infrastructure, I know Phil doesn't like that word, but we're going to call Phil out on all of these now. But maybe we look at what's best statewide, and do we just go with one vendor? Or
I agree with you, Ralph, and we're going to talk about this when we get further into the plan. The problem then, is the different CAD systems used, the different call handling software and equipment used. I mean, if we go with standards or baseline or best practices, whatever you want to call it, that could be applied across various systems used, it's probably more achievable. While what you're saying would be ideal, I think there's a few things that could prohibit that from happening, unfortunately.
This is Bart. On page 24, to answer the question of where we're going, this is what we had now for the future state. And then down in year 3, the cyber coordination. So these are the things that we had identified that we want the future state to look like. So that's kind of where we're headed. We thought we were headed to, right? So to answer that question on if we know what the end result looks like, then we could better answer that question, I guess, is what I was saying. So every 911 system is supported and working toward a defined cybersecurity and access control baseline. The state provides shared safeguards, monitoring, education, and coordinated incident response. Encryption practices and access controls meet a consistent statewide baseline. Cyber conditions are defined before new digital capabilities are deployed statewide. Long-term planning addresses architectural and encryption risks that no single system can resolve alone. And if you look down over year 3, one of the things that Ralph had just brought up, shared cyber services sustain. That was one of the things that they talked about, that we talked about when we went through this planning process with the workbook. Does that make sense? Did that answer the questions or not? Like,
I mean, yeah, I mean, I understand what you're saying, but I think that all of the points that I've raised prior to that still apply. Like it's still overarching in my opinion. It's perhaps too broad. So.
Term baseline is too broad, or?
No, again, we just have a bunch of reference to cybersecurity and risk and everything. And I want to be clear that what we're talking about is as it relates to delivery of 911.
I think the concern we heard when we were talking to folks is there are so many things changing so broadly and so differently throughout the state. How do we even have a picture of what needs to be protected from a risk perspective? And again, I see what you're saying. You know, I don't care about a local PSAP's email. I get it. But again, I think there's a whole world of variation that's happening in technology out there. And that was the broad concern.
I understand that. What I would say is like, for example, I have a CIO. So whatever standards and I'm sure others do as well, when we start talking about these baselines or standards or whatever the case may be, that's going to have to be bumped up against the various policies and things established by a CIO amongst all of these various entities, because we're not all under one CIO, and it will make a difference.
I didn't hear that every PSAP or ETSB is supported technically by a CIO.
Right. I understood, but some are.
But not Chicago, because we don't know.
We don't know what Chicago has. They're not part of this advisory board. So when I look at your future state items that you just read through to try to describe where we're trying to get to, I'm not sure many of those are very measurable. And so again, this is a very large, very complex topic that I don't think can be boiled down into a simple solution. Everyone's going to have to pour a lot of resources. I know our companies pour a ton of resources into cybersecurity. Nobody wants to end up, you know, in a situation where your system has been taken down by hackers, right? And we certainly don't want there to be a lack of response to 911 due to some kind of cyber issue. But I don't know that a statewide plan can put in place a cybersecurity practice for every PSAP, 168 of them in Illinois.
On 4.2, since we're both under focus area 4, I won't rehash what I said, but when you talk about terms like data, privacy, and records, I want to be clear that any sort of recommendations we put out there as it relates to data, privacy, and records, we need to understand that all of that data and those records are potentially governed by other requirements. So again, what I would say is define clear rules for data, privacy, and records as it relates to 911 or under the jurisdiction of 911 or something along that line, because there's a lot of data and there's a lot of records.
Noted. Being specific that it all relates and ties back into 911 specifically.
I'll just, on top of what Michael had to say, I will just point out that the General Assembly has been very interested in data handling, data sharing, data selling, all of those topics. So as you're putting a section together on data, you might want to be very specific as to what you're trying to achieve and not leave it open-ended for them to decide.
Thank you. Noted. All right. And so,
Real quick, the slide deck is not advancing the plan, just so you guys are aware.
Are you not seeing page 11?
A bunch of us are currently just seeing the strategic plan priorities at a glance, sir.
Yeah, that's page 11. That's where we're at.
so on page 11,
So if I could just add one comment to the data sharing rules, the current state, again, I want to be clear that we're not trying to solve anything here. We're saying that broadly, we haven't heard that it's well defined is where we were trying to go with some of this. So data sharing rules and record handling expectations are not clearly defined for NG 911. So again, it wasn't we're trying to say what types of data should be shared or anything like that. It's
But I think we have to. I think
Okay.
that's the point is I think we're gonna have to be clear about what data, what records we're talking about. Because some of them are not they are not controlled by the board. They're not, it's not our place to give recommendations about them. There are standards that already exist.
So one of our thoughts was that it would be whatever advisory board gets created to handle this topic would more narrow down that wording and stuff. Or is your expectation that the narrowing down happens in the strategic plan?
And that's fine, but when we publish a plan, it should be clear to the reader that we're not talking about every piece of data or record that a PSAP potentially touches.
Got it.
so moving on to page number 12, we can see that each of the strategic plan priorities on page 11 will then be assigned to a year, a benchmark. So at the very top, we have foundational actions, and these include defining and measuring the full cost of 911. You're going to wordsmith the word modernize as we covered, but 1.2, modernizing the funding formula and capital planning. 2.1, establish statewide performance metrics, reporting, and data guidance. 4.1, establishing the statewide cybersecurity and access control baseline. 6.1, clarity, decision rights, and state/local governance roles. 8.2, strengthen policymaker and legislative engagement. So these are all going to be foundational actions, and goals. These goals are structured into 4 tiers based on their logical dependencies, and as we confirmed during the workbooks during the 3 sessions that we had, the most highest priority actions. So the foundational actions here represent the basis on which all other goals depend and begin immediately. And then year 1 goals address the critical pain points that we heard, and then they require the near-term actions, and they build upon the foundational priorities. And then year 2, expand on the progress made in year 1, and then year 3 represents the cumulative actions on the 3-year commitment, completing the work built on the foundation. So the foundational actions are the most important, and based on the previous workbooks, should be looked at immediately.
So just a question for my clarification. The foundational actions, although they are the baseline, they will evolve throughout the process of the 3 years, right? Because we won't be done with those to move from year 1 to year 2. Those will evolve through the entire process, correct?
Absolutely.
Yeah, okay.
But the work done in the foundational actions should begin immediately and then follow down.
Got it.
This is purely cosmetic, really. Going back to page 11, the headings, and then they're explained on the next page. Could there be something on page 11 just saying headings explained next page, some reference? I mean, it's a flow thing.
Absolutely. Thank you for that point.
And then this is Randy. The bottom of page 12, I know you haven't quite got there yet, the three subcommittees, operations and technology. And this is going to be an issue that carries throughout here, but I'm still unclear what we mean when we say EZNet to EZNet interoperability. And we talk about it in terms of gaps, because I'm not aware of any interoperability issues between the four EZNet providers in Illinois.
I am.
Well, you are?
I am.
I'm sorry.
AT&T and the digital cannot, they're not interoperable.
That was not my understanding.
It's operationally not interoperable.
Okay, can we talk afterwards? Thank you.
And I just want to make a point here. The things that are in the strategic plan, it's the accumulation of a lot of different voices, and we just wanted to make sure that it is included. It's synthesized, refined many times, but we do recognize there's a lot of information, and on each goal page, as we're going to move into very shortly, we wanted to ensure that the background and the current state captures all of those voices so that the state can really understand from a collective understanding of where we are today, and then how can we make actionable changes happen for the next 3 years. And so one of the ways that we previously discussed from an ideation perspective that we could move towards these goals is the creation of subcommittees and the practicality of applying these implementation changes. And so on page 12 at the very bottom, we have the ideation of 3 subcommittees that includes finance and governance, which focuses on focus area number 1 and 6, operations and technology, focusing on focus areas 3, 4, and 7, and then workforce standards and engagement subcommittee focusing on focus areas 2, 5, and 8. Now, this was very briefly touched upon our last workshop. Did we have any ideas, thoughts on this structure?
So my thought is on the finance and governance, sorry. I want to be clear in terms of when you throw the term finance in there, and even under there it says formula review. While there are things that I think could happen in a subcommittee, such as, understanding full cost, some other things of that nature, I think that there's been plenty of discussion, and I don't mean to speak for anyone, but when we get to formula review, I don't think that's going to happen in a subcommittee. I think that is something that is going to need full discussion of the board, because as I've said, these subcommittees can only have so many people on it. And when we get to formula, everyone's going to want to be at the table. So I'm not saying no, I'm saying let's be clear in that this can be pre-work in terms of finance, but formula discussions, and stop me if anybody disagrees with me, is going to happen as a board.
Michael, one of the things that we heard on the feedback around this since the last time the workbook went out is that we got overwhelming majority saying that they want to be part of the discussions, anything that touches finance, and we've understood that. And so our understanding is if the subcommittee could do the legwork, putting the materials together, doing the research and all of that, and then the board works on it together is how we are understanding it. But again,
okay.
Yeah, this is Ralph. We were pretty pointed last time we had this conversation that this should be a group-wide effort because it does impact all of us, and there's a lot of passion. And if you get a small subcommittee that leads it in a certain direction, I think that's going to be harmful to the rest of the state and the rest of the memberships, if you will. So I suggest bringing it back to the board level, not necessarily a subcommittee. It's too important. It's our future. And everyone's going to want to be on it. And it's important to have people on the other subcommittees also. I just think that needs to be up at a higher level.
Now, Rob, do you agree though there could be some pre-work done before we start actually talking formula?
Yeah, I don't know what that looks like because we're going to need your people. We're going to need Sheila and her team, and
right.
Yeah, I mean there could be some pre-work done, I guess.
I think when looking at is like total cost to deliver 911. We need to kind of paint that picture before the board's going to be able to even have the conversation, if you will. I don't know. I realize that there's a stopping point. At some point, you're talking about how we're going to build the formula, in which case everyone's going to be at the table.
I guess this is Melinda. I guess I just don't know what that would look like. Would a subcommittee be evaluating the outside AFRs to calculate a formula or, to
No,
calculate the cost?
I think they put forward what it looks like to collect it to the board and say,
Okay.
this is how we think we could collect this information. Do you agree as a board before it is put out to try and collect that information?
Okay, that might, yeah.
Does that make?
Yeah, but I still think you need a full board though, because we are also different. Our system is different than DuPage County's, and it's different than Ralph's and Phil's. So I don't know how that would work.
So one of the things that just a theme that carried out throughout most of the discussions was the lack of case studies, when somebody consolidated or somebody did something else. So there was an opportunity to learn from each other that really isn't formalized now. And like we put in the last board meeting, we put a bunch of posters up that showed, just based on the current AFR data, not defending it, what the cost per 911 call was. So one of the concepts that we wanted to introduce with that is, what are ways that we can look at spend and have key indicators, if you will, that we can use to help drive, well, how are we doing? Where can we improve? Who's doing something that I can learn from? So there might, and again, it's not meant to be anything other than a learning opportunity, but there's very little quantifiable data that we've seen that helps one PSAP learn from another, or one county learn from another. So it was more of a concept of how do we quantify some of this stuff, learn from it. Then when we do take funding arguments forward or requests forward, it's structured, it's consistent, it's quantifiable. And all of that seemed to be missing in the discussions that I sat in.
I feel that we need to start as a board, and then if we find tasks that we can break down and groups of us can work on together, that we assess that when it comes to this is too hot, it's too emotional, and it needs to be transparent in this fashion right here. No closed doors, and I'm not saying that anybody's saying that it was going to be that way, but I feel that as we step through these processes and learn where some of these roads are going to take us, there may be opportunities for us to break into smaller groups to capture data and do things. With your statement that the case studies and the share across the state, I think judging from, I just came back from a national conference, and what we have in Illinois is something that is very special. I'm not just trying to brag on our two associations, but when you see how they do share, sometimes overshare information and build, I think we are leaps and bounds ahead of where we're at. So I would fundamentally disagree with the statement that we're not case management sharing. Yeah, there's some people that don't get that information, and that's just there's 168 of us, if you want to count PSAPs or whatever. So it's always going to be a challenge. Can we always do better? Absolutely. But the way the two associations, not one's better than the other, maybe one's slightly better, but I had to help you out. You're sitting next to me. But I think that there's always room for improvement. And, I know those are two very wide, different discussion points, but when I was talking, I wanted to say it.
Yeah, just from our past history, we locked down in a room for a week straight or over a week straight to formulate the last formula. I don't know why we can't do that again. I know we're all busy, but if you have board members in your shop, Michael, that would commit to that, let's just lock down that the week of September, whatever, we're going to all lock down for a week. Bring all your budget books, all your data, Like I have a budget person that knows it better than me. I would bring my budget person and we would flush out what does it take to run my dispatch center. Melinda, you bring your team or whatever. And we are all different. And we just work it out. What data do we want to collect to show what it costs to run a center and an ETSB too, because that's a separate entity on its own. What's it cost to run an ETSB? And let's just do it. I mean, and I know it takes a lot for everybody to commit for a day or two or a week, but I mean, this is so important. Or we need to do 1 or 2 days a month, just separate from all the other stuff we discuss at a meeting, and we just talk about the formula. And whoever can show up, shows up. If you can't show up, you can't show up.
So I have a couple thoughts on that, Ralph. Not that I don't want to spend a week with you in a room. But I do think there are ways we can make sure that week would be very productive. I do think there is some pre-work that could be done. And to Melinda's point, I think that what needs to be understood is what sort of sample we need to make sure we're drawing on. And it maybe is a larger than normal sample in order to make sure that we're accounting for all of the various shapes and sizes that exist in the state of Illinois. But what I would, and then the other thing I would say to when we go to being productive, I don't think it's just about the Illinois State Police's finance team. We have an amazing finance team. But when you talk about crunching numbers in this fashion and talk about putting dynamics on the formula that have some pretty significant variables, we also may want to look into bringing some experts in order to do that. Outside experts. Again, I have all the confidence in the world in my team. I think the board collectively would probably feel good about the fact that if I brought in an outside firm who had certifications and expertise in that type of thing, we're coming at it from a neutral source of this is how these numbers were all crunched. So again, not disagreeing, and I joke about not wanting to spend a week in a room. I just want that week to be really productive and us to feel like at the end of the day, there was a lot of good information shared before decisions are made.
Yeah, and I referenced your team only because they deal with it every day or every month, let's say. Sheila's done a great job updating us on what the formula looks like, but if each one of us had to map it out on a piece of paper, you'd have 50 different maps, if you will, on the formula. If we had Sheila in the room with us, then obviously she would know the true map on how things are dispersed, and it'd be easier because we need to jump off that platform. We need to say, this is our formula, how do we improve it? But if we don't have the solid baseline of what our formula actually looks like, it's hard to buid a new one, if you will. Or we could just exit out and say we don't even have a formula and start from scratch. But I think we've been using this one for so long that we probably need to start with this one. That's why I referenced your team. I love the idea with additional experts that would know this better than any of us in the room. That would be great to assist us. But
yeah, they've got to be at the table, right? Because you're right. They're the ones dealing with it every single day, and they're the ones that are going to be able to speak to those experts and those outside individuals to make sure we get it right. So again, I was not saying our team is fantastic, and you know, they work extremely hard every single day. And so yes, I agree. They have to be there.
Or at least make copies of the napkin that this is written down on so that we could all start with the same napkin.
I think this time we'll do a little bit better in documentation.
This is John and DuPage. I know that from our previous discussions, we have linked distribution to funding in general. I have to say it because we're talking a lot about this. What we're talking about here is dividing up not enough money. We're talking about pushing around money that's not enough to begin with. It's got to be linked all the time in all of our discussions, as far as I'm concerned. We're not paying for 911 around the state adequately enough. And I know that that's not a function of this board. It's not a function of the Illinois State Police. It's a function of lawmakers, legislators. But when we talk about how we're going to fund and how we're going to change things, it's always got to be in the same discussion as there's not enough money right now. We've been receiving the same surcharge for almost 10 years and everything costs more money. And I know we want to put a lot of data behind that too, which I'm all in favor of if it helps. But the statement of we've been receiving just about the same amount of money for the last decade, or almost the last decade, everything costs more money. It's so hard for me when I'm listening to these conversations. I'm grateful that we're talking about making it fair and making it transparent and making it across the board. That's all great. But I would be lying if I didn't tell you that I sit here during these discussions and squirm, because all we're really doing is pushing around not enough money. We're distributing not enough money. Like that's not good. So I had to say something, because these two discussions about the amount of money and then how it actually gets distributed have to be part of the same discussion. I'm not even really looking for comments. I just wanted to get that out there because I think it's so important to everybody around the state. Thank you.
So the finance portion is definitely something that we can relate to a future session. However, we have governance, operations and technology, workforce, standards and engagement that have the opportunity to receive subcommittee structures and have designated owners that can own up that portion of that implementation being carried out. Does the board like the idea of subcommittees that own that portion of those focus areas and are actively helping in parallel to drive those forward with the implementation roadmap in place? Is that an idea that we like?
We can't do it all. The people that are here and in DuPage and online can't do it all. So, I mean, otherwise our 3-year strategic plan turns into a 30-year strategic plan very quickly. So we're going to have to leverage help from others to get that done. This is our first step in doing that. So we're going to have to evaluate how it's effective, how we do it, how it reports back and all the things. But I know that's not what we're supposed to be doing in this meeting right here. We kind of jumped off the deep end a minute ago, so I'll try not to do that again.
It's rough again. I think what's going to sidetrack us is if we don't get the formula done first, I could care less about the other two. I need to pay my bills. I need to figure out what the formula is and the impact the formula is going to have on me. So I think we need to push that aside first, and then we can concentrate on the other. If you pulled me into a committee meeting on the other two, my mind's still back on the first one, on the finances. How am I paying my bills? It's nice to talk about the others, but I mean, when it comes down to it, there's basic needs and then there's wants. Technology, there's wants. I want more people and so forth. But if you don't have the funding, I'm not sure how you get to the other two and set standards and workforce issues if you don't have the funding. So I'm not so sure we shouldn't put closer to the formula in the proper funding. And like John says, an increase obviously is needed before we can even jump on the other two. And maybe people could do all three. I don't know, but there's going to be some of us that are just going to be locked down on the first one. And until we get through the first one, I don't know how we're going to pay for the next two. So.
The only thing I will say to that is I don't see them as mutually exclusive in terms of, I don't think that a true in-depth look of the formula can happen as fast as the need for a surcharge increase. And I think that there's more time than we have, than I would guess that all of you would say that is available before an increase occurs. And so perhaps we look at the short game, what data and information can we present that shows the need for an increase now? And then how do we develop long-term what should be driving the funding formula and what sets the surcharge? But I don't think that happens quickly. So what solution exists that could happen quickly to provide funding now, and then how can that funding be adjusted long term? But I think in terms of a strategic plan, if we're looking at a 3-year plan, we can't set everything else aside and say we're only going to work on funding until we get it right before we focus on those other two areas. So I'm agreeing with what you're saying, but I want to make sure that
perhaps we look at it is that change twofold? What could we potentially advocate for now in terms of a surcharge increase? And then how do we develop a plan that addresses the formula and the needs long-term?
This is John. Michael, I think you said it well. I think because just in a simplified version of all of this, if we had more 911 funding, the decisions that have to be made perhaps about making it more equal or fair across the board, or the different little things that could affect funding, you know, college town, whatever the case might be, that all becomes a lot more palatable when everybody is still seeing an increase because we got more funding. So like it's weird that there's an order to this because we're not in control of the order. So, but I think we're saying the same things there, but it belongs in the strategic plan, funding and distribution, but like, it's such a difficult thing. It becomes so much easier to talk about even the hypothetical if we knew that there was more funding there, that, you know, we're not struggling. Some places are funded as low as 30% or 34%, whatever our findings found when we took those brief surveys of our membership, and figure out, you know, okay, everybody's going to raise up to this level now, let's make it fair on top of all of that. But I've said enough. Thank you.
This is Randy, and I don't really have a strong preference on order here as far as how we, tackle each of these issues in here. I will say, though, that I feel like when I read through this, a lot of this is already well in progress. I mean, I think that PSAPs have engaged in a lot of these issues already as far as workforce training and all these things. And I guess that kind of brings me to a point I was going to make at the very end. I'll just throw it out there now, which is I don't know that the strategic plan, even in the history section, does enough to talk about what Illinois has achieved thus far in its efforts to get towards NG 911, because I think we are ahead of a lot of states in a lot of ways, and we ought to probably acknowledge the decade of effort that's been put into it.
Thank you.
All right, I'm gonna gauge the room really quick. Do we need a break? Do we need a few minutes? Yes, no. I'm notorious for just running through and not letting people. Are we good? Yeah, I'm good. Okay.
Proceed. Randy, to your point, we really would appreciate the board helping us recognize that section, whatever you think. I think it is a very strategic way for us to recognize the work that has been done and then the work that we're going to build on top of that. So whatever you believe should be captured there, please send them our way. And at the end of today's session, we would like to discuss the best ways for us to capture your feedbacks as we continue to refine and make these changes. And so that is the glimpse of page number 12, and the concept behind the implementation roadmap is for us to say, how do we go from this strategic plan to implementation to putting it into practice so that we can start moving forward. And then on page number 13, we have focus area number 1. And the focus area number 1, we have the title, the goals that are covered. And on the next page, page number 14, we get into goal number 1.1, which is defining and measuring the full cost of 911 operations. I'm going to walk over the structure of how each goal page is set up, because the same structure is repeated throughout the workbook. And so this is really the meat of the strategic plan. At the very top, we have the background, and the background is a very high-level overview of everything that was captured based on all the synthesized information from the interviews, surveys, and the focus groups. And so it gives a very brief background so that anyone reading that doesn't want to get into the details at the bottom can just very plainly understand the top portion. That is the background. And then below that, we have the current state. Where is Illinois today? And then the future state follows that. The goal here was to say that this is where we're starting, and then on the right side is what we're striving to accomplish. And then below that, we have how we'll get there and measure progress. At the very top, we have the years, year 1 to 3, and then the objective for that year, and then the progress markers. We believe progress markers are going to be very critical so that, like we said, measuring that baseline. And like Randy pointed out, some of the points might be harder to measure and quantify, but I think it is important for us to try our best to quantify a baseline and say that we are successfully meeting those baselines as the years progress. So that is the structure. If you have any comment, feedback on the structure, the layout of the goal pages.
Need to go to page 14, don't I? All right. Are you ready for feedback on 14?
Yes.
Okay. Under current state and future state, both of these, the last bullet point says it uses the term audit. I realize that I'm the former financial professional in the room, but the term audit, it speaks to very specific standards and things as it relates to licensed and certified professionals who perform audits. And I think we should be very careful about using that term. I would also like to say that there are limitations in terms of what you're talking about when you say carrier surcharge remittances are not routinely audited. There are aspects of that that are not available for public consumption and won't be. So I just want to be clear about the expectation.
I believe that points to a few comments and feedback that we received through the engagement process of the carrier surcharges not being audited, and some people said that they believe that they should be, and that is what's captured. But you believe it?
I'm not sure that that's something that we can say we have the authority to do so.
Noted. Thank you.
And this is Randy, and we've had that discussion a number of times with regard to statutory changes or administrative rule changes. And again, we're not regulated by the state police, we're regulated by the Commerce Commission. And so, you know, we would be opposed to audits in that respect.
Noted. Thank you.
Now, what I will say is what the state police is trying to do is very much make sure that in terms of number of subscribers matches remittances, there are things that we can verify, but they're not audited. And I just, and this is going to come up in a couple of different areas. I just want to be clear on what expectations are. And I realize there may be a desire for individuals to look into the carrier's books, but I also am very mindful and respectful of the fact that those carriers are not, we're public entities and we're very used to everyone being able to see our books. That's not the case for private entities. It just isn't. And so I just want to be clear about expectations.
This is Melinda. My understanding is that if we were to, I think in my mind, line counts are what we would like to see. And we're not currently seeing them. And I don't know if there's a mechanism to, other than getting the even at the state level, we might need to be at the federal level to get those numbers. But that's what that's as a 911, that's what we've always asked for, to get fair numbers and accurate count so that we know whether the distribution and the surcharge that we're receiving is fair.
So do you mean total number of subscribers across all carriers?
Well, and broken down by zip code, you know, so that each agency knows that if what they're getting is what they should be getting. That's historically what we've always asked for, because when we had landline phones, that's what we got. down to, we got every month we had a count.
Yeah.
And when wireless came along, we didn't, and then you've got the nomadic part of that. And I get it, it gets sticky, but this in general, that is what we as 911 agencies have always asked for.
Okay. I'll have to take that back and see exactly what sort of possibilities there are. I mean, in terms of by carrier, I don't see that as doable. But in terms of total by zip code, I don't know. I'll have to take that back.
Yeah, just to go on record, we've talked about this for years, obviously the carriers are gonna, fight any audits. And we just see with the multi-million dollars that are coming in surcharge wise, there should be some oversight. And I don't know how to get there. Maybe it's legislation at the federal level, like was discussed, or the state level. It's not any personality thing that we're against the carriers or anything like that, but there's a lot of safeguards on the 911 side and different things. We can withhold your surcharge and there's penalties and things, but it just seems like, I don't want to say the carriers get a free ride, but we've been asking for information for years. And in Randy's role, where he's coming from, he should oppose that. I'm not saying Randy shouldn't. I'm just saying if it's taxpayers' dollars that are coming through the state, I think every dime should be audited where it's coming from, and is the counts matching up with the monies that are coming in. That's all. We don't want to know any competition issues between him and another carrier, or AT&T gets versus Verizon. We don't need to know that, but the state police or somebody, the ICC, somebody should have the ability to say, yes, the monies that are put aside for surcharge or earmarked by the Public Act are true numbers that are coming in every month or every year. I don't know how you want to, every quarter, but I don't know if we'll ever get there, but maybe the strategic plan should mention the future legislation is needed to get better counts, because from our side, that's always been what we've struggled with, is that it's trust us and have faith in us, and we're telling you we're giving you every dime, and they probably are. I'm not saying they're not, but why not verify that in some manner? And I don't know what that looks like. Randy probably has a better idea. Maybe Randy has a compromise in there somewhere for future legislation, but we're good on our side opening all our books, because we have to on the surcharge. It'd just be nice to be able to account for all the surcharge where it's going in our little circle, if you will.
I wanted to be clear on expectations. And when we write this plan, I don't want to put expectations in there that perhaps aren't realistic.
Sure, I agree.
As far as statute goes, I mean, I think the statute requires carriers to collect a surcharge. And it describes where the surcharge is to be collected, where it's to be remitted to. If we're not doing those things for every customer the way we're supposed to be doing, we're violating the statute. I thought we agreed to some kind of penalties in the last revision of the ETSA as well, as long as we got a notice, right? As far as the right counts and all those things as well. So we've conceded in a number of areas already, but we're not gonna take on the cost of full audits annually for that number when the statute already requires us to do it, and we're doing it anyway.
Yeah, no surprise at all, Randy. Thank you.
All right, are there any other feedback for goal 1.1? And then again, I think we might not have enough time to run through all of the areas. What is the board's preference today? Do we want to briefly touch on each page? Because there can be a lot of detailed discussion on each. What do we prefer? Do you want to find a way to get your feedback to us through a Microsoft form, one-on-one discussions with ISI, and then having that feed into our August discussion? What is preferred? Any ideas?
You have a lot of bullet points left.
I do.
Oh, do you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm just being candid. I mean,
I'm glad you
I
do.
realize we're 2 hours in. So
Yeah.
at any point you want to,
Yeah, Melinda says let's do it. I'm good. I don't feel like we are.
I had a lot of time this weekend.
Yeah.
And and I hope everybody knows, I've tried to stay very neutral and allow the plan to evolve because I really want the plan to be the board's plan. And I wasn't sure exactly what the first draft was going to look like, but once I had an opportunity to dive in, my entire intent with all of this is to be clear, to be fair, and to have realistic expectations. This is a 3-year plan that I don't want to go into a drawer. So I'm sorry, Ralph. Yes, we're about a page and a half into 3.5 pages.
No, I'm thinking this is good. I'm not criticizing that. I'm glad that you actually did that, and I'd like to work through those. And if it takes us a few more hours, it takes us a few more hours. I'm sure ISI could order pizza in right now, and we can continue on.
You don't have to order pizza. Let's just keep going.
No, that was in jest. I'm good with continuing.
I could retort that, but I'll be professional.
Maybe we can just go down your list and you can take us to those pages, and that might.
I'm fine with that.
Yeah, do that. Let's do
Is
that.
that what you want to do?
Perfect.
Okay.
Michael, before we move on to those comments, is everyone good with the layout and the structure of the goal pages? Do we have any feedback on the structure? Okay. Nothing, yes, and move on.
The only thing I'll say to that step is I'm reserving final opinion on that until I see once we start making some changes.
Got it.
Is that fair?
Yeah, absolutely.
My overall statement on the structure is I came up with the same thing that Michael did initially, is when I opened this up and saw 42 pages, there's not, like, I'm vested in this process and I will read all 42 pages. We're going to have to come up with something that's short and sweet to give to some people to move it. But 40, I mean, some of my legislators will read 42 pages, but with no disrespect, if every discipline dropped off a 42-page document to a legislator, a whole lot of nothing's going to get read. So we're going to have an executive summary of the executive summary at some point.
So, yeah, one of the deliverables, Phil, is ISI is to help us with what will go in the annual report as it relates to this, which is clearly not 42 pages. It's going to have to be, and simultaneously, there's going to have to be a document that could be handed to a legislator that I don't know exactly, maybe 2. I mean, we're going to have to be very careful about how much. Now, we can tell them there's a 42-page document they can go look at, but we got to boil it down to a very concise overview. So that is one of the deliverables that's in the statement of work.
And then if I can add to that, Phil, one of the internal discussions, we've had plenty of them, is how do we condense all of the information that was captured statewide? One of the biggest things that we focused on is really the biggest portion of the planning process for the strategic plan development was engagement of stakeholders. And we took a very big change management perspective while developing that. And so we captured a lot of variables. And this plan currently tries the best to preserve as much of the things that were synthesized. And we do expect refinements of that other version that is more executive friendly to certainly be out. So this is more for the board for the board and the general community to have all the details captured, and then maybe an executive summary to follow. Sorry, Michael. Maybe we can start with the comments.
Ready for me to go?
Yes.
Okay.
So before you do that,
yeah,
seriously, it'll probably take 20 minutes to prepare if we want to look through it. Do we want to do that?
I don't.
Okay.
I'll try and move quickly. All right, moving on to page 15. The second bullet point under background. I guess my question is our capabilities in order to review variances mentioned, such as seasonal and daytime population. Again, realistic expectations. Do we have those capabilities? I can't answer that question. Maybe some of you can. $15. I'm on the right page. I promise, Bill. I remembered that time. Second bullet point under background. So just a concern, and again, we don't have to decide that right now, but that's what came into my mind. Also under that same second bullet point, and this came up earlier, there's a statement of network reliability gaps. I think we need to quantify those. And I know, Phil, you said you're aware of them, but I guess in order to be fair, I would like to know what some of those are. And maybe that's in some of the data that ISI has, but I would be curious and would like for that to be shared with Alicia and I. Also on the second bullet point, I'm curious how we're going to quantify the demand of internet connected devices. And this is I won't go down this rabbit hole because I could talk about this for far too long, but I'm curious how that is quantified. And I'm also curious as to the authority that allows collection on such devices because of the very definition of what it says the connection has to be. And it's Randy, I'm going to screw this up again. CMRS, is that right? CMRS connection, and whether or not those devices qualify as a CMRS connection. So we don't have to decide that today, but before we finalize this plan, I don't want statements in there that say things like demand of internet connected devices, and it also implies the fact that there should be a surcharge when I'm not sure that that question has been answered. I'll leave it at that unless there's any discussion.
On that, and maybe there's a better way to frame up, I think what we're trying to accomplish there is we came from an evolution of, we were funded, 911 was funded by strictly landline. And then this thing came along and we towed around in our car in a bag.
Yeah.
And then now we've evolved into, and we're currently in the evolution of VoIP, and we've kind of made that evolution. Now we're in the Internet of Things. And we in the PSAP world are accepting calls from legacy, twisted, beautiful copper wire in Calhoun County, Illinois, to a refrigerator that can call 911. And how do we continue to fund 911 appropriately? Nobody wants to build the Internet of Things because that gets us all wrapped around the axle. But what is the vision? And I think that's what that statement is trying to capture. It's maybe got more detailed than it needs to be, but where are we at? There's a long history from over here at my left hand of twisted copper lines. There's 50 years involved in that, probably in some cases. But now we're getting every one of us probably had a device in their car that could call us today, or their car alone. So how do we evolve forward? And I think that's what that statement is trying to capture with that. Now, are we going to get that done in 3 years? Probably not. But
I don't disagree. I just think we need to be careful about the language and how it's stated in here. I really do.
Agreed. I agree, but I also think we need to make sure that we don't, in this plan, we can't wait 3 more years to start accepting what's the future of that, and of the Internet of Things, and whatever the next thing might be.
Same page, third bullet point under background. It feels like this implies.
So could I interrupt? I'm sorry. Just go back to your earlier comment about the seasonal and daytime. One of the things that we heard from many different in session was, again, going back to your point, when you have fixed landline, that's great. We have a very mobile society today. We have schools, we have events that massively impact some 911 geographic areas. And how do I get a part of, if I've got 100,000 more students here during the school year, how do I have the 911 support for that? Or if it's an event or something like that. And that concept of variability of population was heard in many different interviews.
The sentiment is understood. My question is our capability to quantify it.
Again, we're not trying to solve it here. We're trying to say it is something that should be
But
taken
is it
into account.
quantifiable? So do we put it in our plan that we want to do this if we don't have a way, even in 3 years, to quantify that? That's my question. And I'm not saying there's not. I'm just not aware of what it is.
Yeah, I think some of this stems from the University of Illinois, where we have over 65,000 students. Most of them are coming in from outside the county, wherever mom and dad gets their phones. And I know you're all aware of this, that they're getting the surcharge, but the students are calling our center. So it's disproportionate for our center to have that amount of folks that actually live in our county and go to school and work in our county, but yet the funding for a 911 center is going to another location, not necessarily even in the state. It could come from Madison, Wisconsin, for all I know. But so, I don't know how to solve that either. And we've had other bigger problems throughout the years since I've been on the board. So I've always put this on the back burner, but it should be understood that there are some areas that you've got a ton of people using your services, but they're paying for a center in another state or another city in our state. So, and again, I don't know how, maybe the University of Illinois should track how many students are outside the county and charge them $1.50 on their, but they're not going to do that. It's like the telcos don't want any extra fees on their bills, and University of Illinois, if they have extra fees, they want to collect the fees. They don't want to say, here, center,
Yeah.
you're not getting the surcharge you should have gotten over the last, I don't know how many years we've been collecting surcharge. So I don't know how to solve it, but it is an issue, not just in our county, but I'm sure in a couple other counties also.
Yeah, but it's in our plan. If we say we're going to review, including a review of seasonal and daytime population variances, can we do that? Do we have the capability to do that? I'm again.
Oh, yeah, I don't disagree with you. I'm not so sure how to do
Well,
that.
that's why I'm afraid of putting it in the plan.
Sure,
You know what I mean?
I
If
understand.
we say we're going to do something, do we
Right.
have a mechanism?
Well, the technology exists. It's whether or not the carriers want to share it.
No, wait. First off, I'm not sure that's an accurate statement. But I don't think that this document should be used to tee up issues essentially that we can't define with data or have the ability to solve in the timing of this strategic plan. I'm not saying we shouldn't cover all the different challenges that are out there, but sometimes if you tee up too many issues for other people that you're asking to help you solve a problem, they're going to get lost in the forest. And I don't think that's what we're trying to do here. So you can throw a million things out there that we've tried to resolve over the last 5, 6, 7 years that don't seem to have a very good resolution to them, but it's just going to lead to more questions with fewer answers.
Yeah, Randy, I appreciate that. That's why most of the time I don't bring it up. I could have brought it up every single meeting, but I totally agree with you on that. And, maybe that's something we look down the road 3 years from now, we look at it. I'm not sure, but it's still an issue out there. It's like my dark backup center that I try not to bring up very often. So now I'm getting penalized for my students. I'm getting penalized for some other reason there, but I try not to bring those items up because we have bigger fish, bigger things to tackle. But still, that hits home at me. Not only is my monthly check not enough, then I have these other issues too. But it's not about me; it's about the state as a whole. And so I try to time my comments in regards to those two items, and where I don't bring them up all the time.
And I don't want to be dismissive of any of these points. They're all factors in how you run your centers and work to respond to emergencies, and that's all critical as well. But those students also spend a lot of money in Champaign and Urbana and the county as well. And the events, the large events, bring a lot of money in locally as well. And so when the local government helps fund some of 911, maybe that's how that works out in the end.
No, you're right. And that's why we have property tax and sales tax. We collect that from those students that actually do that. But when it comes to surcharge, we don't. So.
Yeah, same here. We have Southern Illinois University. All we have is surcharge. We don't get money from university or any place else. Surcharge is our only source of funding. So, and I'm not trying to pick on the carriers. When I look at this, I think population. I don't think of line counts necessarily. And I think that maybe that it's the population, the daytime population that could possibly be a factor in the formula, along with, uh, call volume and things like that. I think it's just a way, I see it as a way of quantifying, if we can, and maybe we can't, of the reality in each PSAP. And that's all. I'm not, I don't see this as a backdoor way to try and get, more information or get more funding from Chicago, because a lot of our students are get theirs from, they're in Chicago. Their parents are in Chicago. So we don't get that, but we do get those calls. So that's what we're trying to solve.
Yeah, it doesn't necessarily need to be stated in the report like I think you're suggesting, Randy, but when we do consider a new formula, there are other factors we should consider. And if we can level the playing field a little bit, maybe not dime for dime or nickel for nickel or penny for penny, there's no more pennies anymore. But, it would be nice to be able to do that, because we based it on population in the past. Maybe we need to consider population, calls for service, and some of these other factors. That's all. And at the end of the day, it'd be an easy thing for me to give up that, hey, we've been doing it this way for years. We've been shorted for years, and that's fine because it's what's best for the state. And so, but I do think we ought to have a discussion, and I think this has been healthy. And again, it's not against the carriers. It's not us, slapping at the carriers. It's just we see something that's not maybe fair throughout the state, and we don't have an answer. If I had an answer for it, other than the university tacking on $1.50 per student per month, but they're not going to do that. So I don't know what it looks like if we're looking at the formula.
Yeah, I didn't take it as a swipe at the carriers at all. I just, like Michael, I'm just not sure where or how you're going to get the data to quantify it. And that's going to be the difficult part.
Okay, under the third bullet point on background, I feel like this implies a statewide governance over capital planning. Maybe I'm reading too much into it, but I don't know that that's really what we're looking for here, is it? I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong.
Yeah, I don't have the answer for this one either. I'd make $1 million if I did, but there are some counties that just can't afford for a capital replacement plan, and they just wait for something to break or something that needs to be replaced, and they need to find the money, and obviously surcharge won't be enough to do that. So I don't know if it's just a training issue, if it's an educational issue, but I mean, if you're not putting monies aside for a capital replacement plan for the future, I think you're doing a disservice. And if the legislators don't know that we're doing that also, because they could look at our books and say, you're sitting on $2 million. Yeah, but I'm building a Muhammad Tower site next year and I need $3 million. So I'm still short $1 million, but they only see the bank account that shows you have $2 million sitting in your account, when in fact, that's already been earmarked for future capital replacements or additions. So somehow statewide, we ought to be talking about, if you don't have a capital replacement plan in the 911 industry today at your PSAP, you probably should look at others that do and maybe consider that. And again, it's going to be a funding issue. If you don't have enough surcharge, the users will have to fund the capital replacement plan.
Yeah, I was kind of concerned with the phased statewide approach that helps 911 systems, because I'm pretty sure, Ralph, you don't want me to come in and tell you what you ought to be doing with that $2 million that you've already got earmarked. I guess that was my point on that, is there are individuals out there that have a solid capital plan. And while what you're saying is, hey, everybody ought to have a capital plan, and if they don't have a capital plan, what can we do as a state to provide things that would be beneficial to everyone in the state? But I'm not sure the way it's worded right there captures that.
Yeah, I agree. We certainly don't want you to tell us how to spend.
I figured that. I was making that assumption.
Right.
All right. Current state, bullet point 4. What is vendor bundling? Anyone tell me?
What we're trying to say here is when multiple vendors are brought in. That's one thing that I was trying to summarize.
I'm still not tracking. Is anybody else tracking?
I actually had a question about that one too. I don't know if that's, I mean, is that call handling equipment that we're talking about? Is it network equipment? Is it network costs? I have no idea. It's very, very broad and vague and tells me very little.
Yeah, it says vendor bundling and then product sunsets. I mean, when you're dealing with technology, I understand that we wish technology would last longer than others, but technology doesn't last forever. There's always going to be product sunset. I don't know. That bullet point just didn't add up to, I don't know, a clear picture for me.
Got it, Michael. I can't remember right now, but I will.
Okay. Last bullet point on both current and future state. I already mentioned this concern up above, but I think that we need to address the use of the term audit, and also just the expectation of what carrier collection expectations are. So I won't belabor that. And then same thing down in years 1, 2, and 3. The last bullet point ties to the same exact topic. And I'll be happy to share a version of this. Again, I don't want to, and it's not that I don't want to share it with the board. I really just don't want this to be misinterpreted. My next point is on page 17. I've talked about this a little bit, but just a general comment with regard to data collection and reporting, the number of CAD systems used statewide. To me, this is a big lift and could incur significant costs. So I just want to make sure we're realistic about this. I understand the desired outcome. I think we need to be realistic about what the lift is and what the cost might be.
I think that can be said for this whole entire 2.2 or 2.1.
Oh, I haven't changed the page. Sorry, Phil. Hang on.
I didn't want to.
I'm failing again. Dang it. Okay. Yes. Yeah.
I 100% think that all of this is Noman's work, and we want to be here. And I've probably said this 300 times throughout this whole entire. This is where we want to be. To achieve what we'll get nothing else done than page 17.
I agree. And I think that, again, if this is a valuable strategic plan, it's realistic. It's not a plan of lofty goals. It's a strategic plan. Yes.
Now, with that being said, there's certain things that maybe with working behind the scenes, with using some technology, that we might be able to glean off some data before we have human interaction. Maybe. But there's some of this that.
And what can we accomplish in 3 years? That to me is really what we ought to be capturing here, is what realistically could we accomplish as it relates to this goal in the next 3 years? Because what's outlined here, not going to happen in 3 years, in my opinion.
So just a point of reference, I would guess that somebody smarter than me will help me with the date, but we're in the 90s. We implemented EMD. 2026, July of 2026, and there's not a QA standard. There's not really even a QA. We're all, you should do it. And so should you. And in 3 years, we're going to fix that in the state, and we haven't been able to fix it since 1995. I think what needs to be done, don't get me wrong, I'm a QA person. I think there's value in it. And we can't just keep kicking the can down the road, but since 1990, in the 90s to 2026, we haven't achieved it. And it'll do more harm by kind of what Randy was saying, but we have all these lofty goals and all these things that we say we're going to do, and we don't get them done, is more risk than acknowledging those and saying these are the ones that our priorities are. So
This is John.
I'm all for it. I'm all in.
Sorry to cut you off, Phil. This is John. I think some of this, I understand that it seems pretty lofty. I get that. But some of this could be accomplished by not reinventing the wheel. There's a joint APCO NENA standard for quality assurance that could easily be implemented statewide. There's some things that we could do. When I say things that we can do, there's many of the centers in the state of Illinois are already following the joint standard by APCO and NENA, for example. And that's just one example where, you know, you look at like a call answering standard or the other things that govern us. What I think we're trying to do is, I would say, I mean, I don't know, it's anecdotal, but I think anybody I talk to, it doesn't matter if it's Southern, Central, or Northern, there's an attempt to follow some of the national standards that exist. And so what we're trying to do here is bring everybody up to make sure that everybody's on the same level. It feels impossible, it feels overwhelming, but I don't know that it's as overwhelming as impossible as we're making it, since a lot of that already exists.
This is Heather, and I want to echo what John said, because when I read that first bullet point, it reads to me like we're trying to recreate the wheel, and I don't feel like we need to. I know I spoke on this before, but I'm like year 3 in on trying to push nationwide data collection for 911, and I'm about 2 weeks away from hopefully launching a survey that's going to go out by NENA. This was a hot topic. We've been working on how do we actually define those call answer time, dispatch time, abandoned call, transfer times, many other things. We're even diving into staffing levels. It's taken a lot of work, and seeing this on here, I feel like we have enough other work to be done that if it's being tackled somewhere else, why would we try to tackle it also? And to John's point too, there's great standards out there when it comes to QA and many other things. We just need to look at them and see if they fit us as a state and push that that's what we use.
This is Melinda. Maybe just a suggestion to recognize that it is something that is out there that has, you know, that is not completely being accomplished, and that we are moving toward that, and that it's a continuous struggle and, you know, process. Because as technology changes, I think we're closer than we ever were to being able to automate a lot of this, but I don't know when that'll happen or when everybody could afford to do that, and how accurate it is and things like that. I think we're a ways away from that, but maybe just make some kind of comments that we're moving toward these kind of, that this is a goal that, you know, may not be accomplished, but it's something we should eventually strive for.
I don't, and the same could be said for 2.2. I'm not going to reiterate, but on both of these, I just want to be realistic about a 3-year plan. I don't want to cut these. You know, they are goals. They are important. And to your point, Melinda, can we refine them to say what we really are hoping to do? And again, tapping into what John and Heather said, you know, are there national things that we can rely on to help move our mission forward? All right. So my next is on page 20. Well, I won't repeat it, but I'll just point out to ISI as we look through this, that we mentioned gaps here. Certain gaps fall within state and local authority. Others require carrier performance, vendor capability, and FCC enforcement. I think we really need to understand what those gaps are, because we need to know who really is responsible for those gaps, because we say there's gaps, then we say there's a whole lot of people responsible for it. Oh, I'm on the wrong page. Yes, it is 3.1 on page 20.
Yeah, I'm likewise, I'm confused by those statements as well. Others require carrier performance. I don't know what that means. I'm still unclear about the gaps. And like what FCC enforcement is required that's not available here at the state level? I mean, what are we referring there to specifically?
That point also carries down to current and future state, the third bullet point.
That was actually kind of a question. Like, what are we referring to FCC enforcement over what? I'm very unclear on that.
Go back and review our notes.
We can't hear.
ISI said they will go back and review their notes.
Okay, thanks. Sorry, that was a little rude. Mr. Chair, I'm sorry, we couldn't hear the last statement.
I'm sorry, John, did you hear when I repeated it?
Yes, I did. I was just kind of being funny.
Oh, sorry.
We're all good, thank you.
Sorry.
Real quick, I'll just tag on as well. I mean, when you get into the measuring of the progress, I don't even know what carrier and FCC engagement process established means. Like, what were you attempting to do to establish an engagement process between the carriers and the FCC?
Yeah, I had note of that as well, Randy. And then, like I said, I started to say the third bullet point, right? On current and future, same question. So yeah. Fourth bullet point on current state. I guess my only thought here is that this is new legislation. The rules haven't even been drafted. Like, I guess one of the things, and I'm tagging on to something Randy said, I want to be careful about if we're depicting that there's a problem. Well, this isn't a problem. This is a new issue. I don't think it goes. To me, this paints a picture of, well, what do you mean there's legislation that they haven't addressed? Well, we haven't had an opportunity to address. So perception, I guess, when this is being read, because we can all understand what's going on in the world of 911. I want to make sure anyone who picks up this plan and reads it gets the feel for exactly where we've come from, all we've done, and where we're landing, and what we are trying to accomplish as a board by putting out there and saying, this is our strategic plan. This is realistically what we think we can try and accomplish in the next 3 years. And should there be some stretches? Should we be reaching perhaps higher than we will? We won't hit every single mark. And I'm not saying we have to. I'm not saying it has to be so conservative that we've got to be able to accomplish everything. But there's somewhere in between that, right? There's somewhere in between, we want the pie in the sky and we're going to make our plan so dull that we're really not accomplishing anything. The fourth dot point under future state, the state's role is defined as readiness criteria and guidance, not local procurement oversight. The state doesn't have local procurement oversight. In terms of readiness criteria and guidance, to me, that's helping when the state can provide options to everyone, i.e. through the use of joint purchasing master contracts, yada, yada, yada. I get that part, but second, not local procurement oversight, we don't have that. Page 21. Background, second bullet point. Second sentence, GIS maintenance burden falls unevenly on local agencies. I guess my question maybe first to Alicia. I mean, doesn't GIS data have to be maintained at a local level?
Best practice is that it should, yes. Especially for a statewide initiative.
So are we trying to say that that burden is more burdensome for some than others? Because that's a different statement than what's said here. Because to me, this implies that something should be done so that locals don't have to maintain that data, and that's not the case.
This is
This
John.
is Melinda. I'm
Go ahead,
sorry.
Melinda.
I feel like in this and some other ones, there's a subjective factor in this. And the current state is that local authorities maintain the GIS data. And I feel like that's what it should say. And if we want a different future state, that the state should, then we can say that. But I feel like this is, there's kind of a bias in there implied, and I don't feel like that's proper. Because right now the local agencies maintain the GIS data. And I think, period, yes. And I think like if we do want a future state, like we said before, maybe that the process is more automated to alleviate the burden of any burden on the local authorities to you know make that process easier would be the future state. But to take out the burden language, if we could.
I mean, it is a burden.
But the goal is to make it easier.
Yeah, I think.
And
I
the
mean,
state's
it's
responsible
heavy
for that.
It's a heavy lift, right? And what you talked about in your report, you know, as more we get automated and more that, and I mean, the process is clunky, but it's clunky in 50 states. You know, it's not uncommon. But I think that I mean, it is a heavy lift, and it's a heavy lift. The smaller you are, you're contracting that out because you don't have a GIS professional. I'm very blessed that I do for as small as we do. So there is some burdensome there, but I don't think it is appropriate. I don't think we're capturing that in that statement, right? It's a heavy lift. We would need to continuously get better on it.
Also on page 21. Oh, wait. John, were you going to talk when Melinda was talking and then we never got back to you? I apologize.
No, I think Melinda said what I was thinking, and I don't have anything further. Thank you.
Okay. Background, third bullet point. Second sentence. Carrier side location accuracy issues are addressed through FCC engagement under goal 3.1. Don't know what that means.
I don't know what it means with 3.1, but I do believe that there is a carrier that in my jurisdiction that is now may not be anymore, that provides absolutely terrible location data. But I don't know if that's what that's referencing. I don't know how it's tied back, but like I have a wireless provider that I mean, but they've now are owned by someone else, so that will quickly change probably.
So we need to be aware of those, right? But the whole sentence, because in the second half is addressed through FCC engagement under goal 3.1. It doesn't make sense.
I don't understand.
All right, well, if you don't, Randy, then I'm in trouble.
I don't understand what the point is.
I don't either.
Here, I don't.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I should be turning the microphone on when I talk. I don't understand what the statement means, or what they're trying to address there.
Yeah. Okay.
Michael, this is
22.
Heather. Are they trying
Yeah,
to
Heather.
point to the various FCC orders towards carriers and location, Z-access, and the following? And then on that topic also, when we were talking about like legacy and NG, are they referring to filings for phase 1 and phase 2 in those orders?
No, that wouldn't have anything to do with the location routing or the location accuracy of.
Yeah, I
carriers.
understand the phase 1 and phase 2 filings, but other various orders put out by the FCC that are out there when it comes to location with carriers. I didn't know if maybe that's what they're referring to.
Oh, yeah. I think those got lost in translation, especially those two sentences together there under that point.
Yeah, I think if it's going to stay in, we just got to have some, it needs to be clear. My next item is on page 22. Oh, well, some of this has been covered, but I'm going to bring it up so we know it, so it gets addressed. But there is also another reference to gaps in interoperability between EduNet providers. I just want to make sure that we're capturing that. I know that Phil and Randy are going to talk, but let's, again, I want to make sure that we're clear in any language that we're using. Background, second and third bullet points. I have some heartburn with the amount of language as it relates to radio communication on this page. It's also under current and future states. I understand that radio communication is very much interconnected with the delivery of 911. I have concerns. I have concerns, like, for example, third bullet point under current state, radio reliability for fire and EMS is a persistent gap in parts of the state. It may be, but does it belong in the 911 strategic plan? Radio, radio is important, but let's not muddy the waters with our strategic plan with what radio needs to improve, in my opinion. You guys can tell me I'm wrong.
So I think it's a fine line because it is something that we do spend money on. Every single one of us do somehow, some way. So do we set that on a shelf and say, hey, we're gonna steer away from that for now because because it is something we do. It is a core function of what we as 911 do. I mean, I'm hearing what you're saying. I'm disagreeing. But I also think are we creating a strategic plan that only talks about answering the phone? And I don't know.
So,
maybe.
But do we control the future state of radio?
I do. In my ETSB, I do. Absolutely. It's pivotal. It's everything we do. Because if I answer it and if I don't do anything with that call, just answering is 25%. Nobody gets there. We're 0%. So, and radio is a pillar of what we do. Huge pillar. But I'm hearing what you're saying. I'm not disagreeing, but it is one of the main things that we do. We answer the call and we talk on the radio to the responders.
Yeah, this is Melinda. I know, I think we've touched on this before, and I think the consensus was, Michael, I think you posed the question, do you want the ISP to be over radio towers or whatever, radio communications in the state of Illinois? And the answer was no. And so I think that's where maybe I don't know. Yeah, I don't feel like we want the ISP and 911 to be over a statewide tower system. So
If
it is controlled but it is controlled at the local level. And so I don't know where to put it in.
so in years 1, 2, and 3, the last bullet point, everyone says like the first year radio reliability plan adopted with fire and EMS partners. Is the board driving that? And year 3, annual radio reliability reporting sustained. Is the board responsible for that reporting?
I don't feel like that's what we discussed. And I don't feel like that's the conclusion we came to. I can see where, you know, a consistent, our current state is this, yes, but I don't know that we agreed that we should be building out the radio infrastructure for the entire state. I think we agreed to the opposite.
I think what we agreed on is that it is something that it's ultra local, that is a heavy lift for some of the local authorities to get over that hump. On how we're going to accomplish it in year 1, 2, and 3, I'm not sure that for that very specific line. CAD to CAD is another discussion, and you probably can have the same discussion with that too. So that's your next. But I don't, like, I'll go back to where I started when I talked about QA. Starcom 21 was built in what year? And
2002, right?
yeah, you know, so let's just say it's 20 years old. We're safe to say that it's over 20 years old, and there was a vision that, you know, there was a vision for that when it was built, and we not got there quite yet. However, not that it has achieved a ton, and will continue. Your turn, Ralph.
Yeah, it impacts our direct dispatch too. Like we back up Vermilion County backs up Champaign County. Well, we can't direct dispatch from our centers. We have to pretty much call the call back where your radio tower sites are so that you can communicate with your first responders. So it is something we need to pay attention to. It is something that we need to look at in the future. But as far as are we responsible for all that? It is important, like Phil said, but I don't know that we should take that on as one of our primary goals, to be responsible for radio communications throughout the state. So I kind of agree with you, and I understand what Phil's saying with that. I don't know how to de-emphasize that. I mean, we need to talk about it in the future. What's it look like so we can direct dispatch Vermilion to Champaign and vice versa. But right now it's under local control. You know, or will there be state grants later to have us all move to a statewide network or you know, a regional network? I don't know. I don't know what that looks like, but you know, that's possibly our future. With EZNet, we could, you know, we can do CAD to CAD, or we can take our calls anywhere we want to. But if I can't direct dispatch from Macon County right now or Vermilion County, all that other stuff really doesn't help me a whole lot. So it has to be part of our business model, if you will. But is it our primary responsibility? I don't know. And I could argue Phil's side that I can't get the first responders to the scene to save the life if I don't have that piece. And I get it. And we are paying, some of our surcharges paying to keep our radio systems up and running. I get that too. But yeah, I'm not sure how to compromise with what you're suggesting and what Phil is stating. So
I think if it stays in there, it needs some finesse. I think that we need to be cognizant of what we're saying we're going to be in charge of.
Yeah, where I sit now and where I sit with my peers here is not a place where we should be saying that ABC, ETSB we should be providing direct oversight. That direct oversight of communications really needs to handle at the local level, and whatever we can do in our seats to help them be more successful and achieve that, that's what we need to do. But we need to stay very high level with that.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is Melinda. Just real quickly, I think we could recognize that it is a problem, that it is part of our cross-boundary interoperability. And just a note, it's police should be included in there as well as fire and EMS. But maybe in the future state and again with the CAD to CAD too, we're getting very specific of this. Maybe we could rely on future technology to resolve these issues, because the way things are rapidly moving, I think there may be some solutions in the near future that may not involve even CAD to CAD, or radio that can be the solution to an interoperability. So maybe like Phil said, be at a very high level of the solution.
Again, we went back and forth on the numerous topics like this, and where we kind of settled is, does it need to be in the funding formula? So we were trying to go back to, ultimately, if we're trying to build a case to justify additional funding, what are all the elements that are going to contribute to that? So again, we kind of internally very broadly said, okay, should this touch the funding formula? Yes, include it. So, but again, we can de-emphasize it, but that's again, some of the rationale with why things like this were put in.
I think that rationale makes sense, but it also may create a pot that boiled over where we can't. I mean, I see where from your stand, I get it. That makes good sense. Understanding how you saw that view, but now we got to get to a pot that we can keep it boiled in the pot, not boil it over.
I don't think we need to have the same conversation about CAD to CAD, but I have a lot of similar thoughts. I'll leave it at that. Current state, 5th bullet point, same page. Interoperability is not consistently addressed in vendor or EZNet contracts as a statewide capability. The problem is the state only has control over one contract. So again, just in terms of being realistic, until the state controls all of those contracts, which I don't know that that's ever going to be the case, I don't know how you address that. My next topic is on page 25. This is a general comment as it relates to provider side security and transparency. Obviously, the state of Illinois has a contract with AT&T. There are specific requirements under that contract. Those are verified annually through an independent review of AT&T's SOC 2 report. So I guess my question is what is the expected outcome when we talk about transparency? And if it's general comments on page 25, because we have, I think I'm on the right page. Hang on. Maybe I'm not. Yeah. Provider side obligate, yeah, thank you, Sam. Fourth dot point under future state. Provider side obligations are transparent with clearer contractual accountability. In my opinion, that contractual accountability is there in the AT&T contract, which is the only one that we oversee. And I mean, like, I don't know if people are, and again, I don't want to go over a point if I'm talking about the obvious, but if people are not familiar with what a SOC 2 report is and how that analysis is done, and then what is provided to the agency to give them assurances, then without that knowledge, you might be sitting back going, well, we don't have enough assurances, but that's why that process is in place. And I don't think that in a lot of contractual relationships as it relates to cybersecurity, access control, things like that, that's a pretty much an industry standard across contracts that we have for this type of relationship. If there's no discussion on that, I'm on to page 27. Background, first bullet points. Illinois has not established a visible career pathway for telecommunicators or for the technical roles a modern 911 system requires. My question is there a single career pathway that could be established? I mean, it says Illinois has not established a visible career pathway. I'm pretty sure, I don't know. The career pathway in my comm centers, I'm pretty sure doesn't look like a career pathway in other comm centers. So is that what we're going for? I mean, if in general, we're talking about a TC being able to go from a TC to some sort of lead worker to some sort of supervisory position to running a center, in general, I guess I understand that. But how it actually looks and the ability for the state to establish that, I think the details of that become a little complicated in my mind. Because PSAPs are very different across the state, and what they do and what the various telecommunicators do, even in terms of their roles and responsibilities, I think are different, aren't they?
Mr. Chair, this is John DuPage. I think all the things that we talk about at the statewide advisory board level, perhaps there should be more involvement from the statewide advisory board in helping with staffing, engagement, morale, recruitment. Those are things that are definitely handled at the local level, but there could be maybe what we're looking for there from just our previous conversations. I just think we're looking for some guidance, some assistance, some support when it comes to career building in 911. I do not disagree with you at the way that that's worded is a little bit vague and doesn't really indicate whose responsibility it is, but I think that's what we were getting after when we did some of the workbook.
I agree, John, and I think that's kind of captured in the future state dot points, right? Because I do think that there's analysis of that statewide that is beneficial for everyone, and I think that there are things we can do to improve wellness, and there are things that we need to look at in terms of overall in the state, in terms of salary and compensation and benefits packages and things like that. But it's not a cookie, it's not a one size fits all solution. I don't think that's really realistic across the state. And specifically on the third dot point where it says supervisory and management development is a distinct funded statewide investment. Okay, yes, but funded at a local level, perhaps with the use of surcharge, but I don't know.
No, I see it. And that first bullet point may not be necessary at all under background because the third one kind of says it better.
Yeah. Agreed. Although in the first, the first dot point, the other thing I would say is small and rural centers face compounding staffing constraints. I don't know that there's a small, rural, big, medium. I don't know that we have centers that aren't faced with staffing constraints. I'm pretty sure it's a national crisis at this point.
Yeah, to your point, under the background, the first one, it says Illinois is not established. Can we say there is not a visible career pathway and not mention the word Illinois? Because there is not I mean, in general, it's nobody's necessarily's fault, but we could probably do better in that area.
Yeah.
So that, because it's a little misleading, it looks like Illinois hasn't done something, which is not the case. So maybe we can just state there is not an established visible career pathway for telecommunicators.
My only other comment on this page as it relates to the out year plans, I believe it's in year 3. Yes. Annual turnover reduction target tracked. The tracking of turnover statewide seems like it could be pretty heavy lift. I'm not saying that it's impossible. Clearly it's doable. Is that one of our priorities for the next 3 years? I mean, I realize it's a problem, but that's going to take money. And I would guess that money would, maybe there would be a desire to spend some money on getting, when I think about staffing, getting the funnel full before we have some great way of tracking the number of people.
You might be able to get that number once you have an LMS process.
Oh, good plan, Phil. I like that.
Maybe not though. But
Okay.
you'll be able to, I mean, because that'll be a process that before you can, that certification is going to
Yeah, onboard and offboarding too. We got to sign people up and they're going to have to be, decommissioned when they leave. So sure. I like it. My next comment's on page 29. This is a general comment.
Could you refresh the page?
Yes. Man, I missed 27 too. I'm never letting Ryan take a vacation day again. Okay, I'll just be transparent in terms of my struggle here. I think it's going to be difficult to navigate the SAB having a single voice in terms of driving what is essentially bargaining unit agreements. So I don't have a magical solution for this one, and I'll be completely transparent about that. But I have concerns. You're talking about a ton of bargaining unit agreements across the state. And the ability to accomplish everything that's outlined on this page in 3 years is a big task.
Is that meant to reference reclassification, that if you were reclassified, other things fall in place, like you can consider FLSA workarounds, you could consider, increasing your compensation to your employees, because they are now recognized as a public safety professional. Is it a baby step just saying reclassification and not everything else? Because you're right, that does tie into union contract negotiations.
Well, and the funding of IMRF too. I mean, like,
Right.
it's massive. So, yes, I mean, I think that perhaps the first step is the reclassification, the ability to, you know, apply FLSA and impact retirement. Not sure we can get that done in 3 years.
Yeah, I think some areas have been able to take some of this on their own because they do have the funding to do that, either through user fees or whatever. And the rest of us have not been able to keep up with this, because we could, and we are trying to reclassify in the state of Illinois, but we're doing it one bill at a time instead of across the board. So we are recognized as first responders or public safety professionals. And that's the direction we should want to go in. If we want to fill the seat permanently and not have the turnover, we're going to have to give better compensation, because they can go across the street at a grocery store or bank and make more money with a better schedule in some circumstances than they can at your center. And again, it's because of our inability to pay because of our surcharge issues. So.
My next comment is on page 31. Is that right? I'm trying. I must be way behind. Oh, I'm going the wrong direction. Whoops. My own fault, right? I did this to myself.
I should have offered to try.
Again, this is a general comment as it applies to, this talks a lot about outlining who is responsible and accountable on a lot of matters. And I'm not sure that necessarily the SAB decides who's responsible and accountable on some of these matters. Things are spelled out in statute, things are spelled out in rule. So again, general comment, but in terms of, like, if you look at the future state, the fourth dot point, the SAB, ISP, ETSBs, PSAPs, and partners use a practical RACI framework for major statewide functions. Not necessarily. Because some of that is, again, dictated by statute, dictated by rule, depending on what function we're talking about. So.
Is the point that we're trying to redefine who has control, or just bring clarity to who has control? I think it was to bring clarity to it, is what we heard.
Okay. My next point is on page 32. Completely understand the intent of this. I guess just a thought on, in terms of planning, and it talks about legislative mandates, being known early, things of that nature. And again, good goal, but like when we talk about future state, external mandates are identified early so stakeholders can provide input before implementation pressure arrives. Not always going to happen. It's not. So again, I'm being a realist here. I'm not saying that wouldn't be ideal. Just, is that 100% achievable? Promise I'm on my last page, and I'm going to page 35. Current state, third bullet point. Backup and mutual aid arrangements are often informal and not consistently funded. Ignoring the funding piece. Backup and mutual aid arrangements are often informal. Is that a true statement? Every backup and mutual aid agreement the Illinois State Police has codified an agreement. And I'm not saying that doesn't exist elsewhere. I'm looking to you guys. Are yours codified? Your backup and mutual aid agreements?
Backup and mutual aid
Okay.
exclusively.
Okay.
I think that mutual aid is two different terms. Mutual aid may be taken back. Let's just take it backup.
Okay.
So I think, and I'll yield to my friends that are smarter than me, we all have to have, in order to submit a plan, we have to have.
Phil, we can't hear you.
Oh.
We have to have one. Sorry, thank you. We have to have a plan. It's in our plan. Our backups have to be submitted to be a certified ETSB.
Okay.
And mutual aid, I don't know what mutual aid consists of. Mutual aid, is that me giving a TC to Ralph because he's having his worst day? Those are very informal. There is a formal process. There's Illinois TERT, but I'm sure across the state it's somewhat, hey, you need some help? I got you. I'll send somebody. And I'm sure there's some of that goes on. Backup, it's very formal. We have to.
Again, my whole thought was I'm a person who doesn't know the world of 911, and I read this plan and I'm like, what do you mean you don't have those things, agreed upon? Because we do.
This is Karina DuPage. There are some that I've been notified of more towards the radio side of legacy systems that there are informal agreements in place that have just historically through consolidation radio systems that are inherent backups or used by multiple PSAPs. And there is confusion over who actually owns radio systems and no actual formal agreement in place. And I think that's where this came from.
Okay. ISI, can you look at your notes? I just want to be careful about what we're stating. I mean, if they're isolated instances, I want to be careful about making broad statements in the plan. But thank you, Corinne. Page 37. Rolling out a public campaign statewide as what I believe is outlined in this goal could be a rather costly endeavor. And I'm not saying the state of Illinois couldn't do it, and I'm not saying the state of Illinois wouldn't do it. My question to the board would be, is that something, I think we would have to discuss the amount of funding that the board would probably prefer the state of Illinois dedicate to something like that. But maybe I'm wrong.
Maybe this is in year 3, we fund this after we get a surcharge increase.
Well, I mean, to be fair though, to get to year 3, there'd work that would have to be done in year 1 and 2. And I'm not sure that, and tell me I'm wrong, but I'm not sure that the board really wants the state of Illinois to start on this endeavor to be ready to have a full-fledged campaign by year 3.
I mean, it's got to be funded appropriately and got to be done right. So we can go back to where we started at about 10 o'clock. If we don't get, some of these are cascading.
Yep.
If we don't get, and this is clearly a cascading priority. We should be a priority. We should be bragging about what Randy addressed and what we built as as an ESI network and what we've done. And text to 911, Alicia just reported some super exciting news today, how many PSAPs are in that. And that's a big deal to the deaf population and all those things. That should be broadcast and we should be sharing that across everywhere. But do we have the funding to do it appropriately? There we are, circle back to 10 o'clock where we started. Maybe not 10 o'clock, maybe 10:30.
Page 38. I'm gonna reserve that comment. My last one is a minor edit on page 41. The sunset date is incorrect. I believe it says August of 2027, and I'm pretty sure we're at December of 2027, aren't we? Yeah, under statute sunset, we got the wrong month. Yep. And that is the extent of my notes. And I promise I'll try and find some additional hobbies. No, I would like to thank ISI. I'm sure that probably felt like I had a big red pen out all over your strategic plan, and I hope you know that that's not my intent. But yeah, I did have some time to spend with this weekend, and I wanted to get you some candid feedback right out of the gate. I wanted the board to know exactly kind of where my mind was as I walked through the plan, and hopefully that will help ISI, but hopefully it will also help the board as you all now get to go back and do a deep dive of yourselves. And I'm sure you will find things that I didn't touch on, and you know, I'm fully prepared for a very robust discussion in August. I will say that I didn't expect this to take 3.5 hours. However, I do think that it was 3.5 hours well spent. I don't think that we wasted any time here today. I think that we had some good conversation. So thank you to everyone for that. So I'll start with ISI. Any questions for me or the board?
No, a comment in general on page 11 where we have the overview of everything. Again, we were very comfortable challenging ourselves internally, going, this is a big lift over 3 years. So when you look at the overview, we have foundational year 1, 2, 3. Again, there's a lot of things in here that are really, maybe it won't get done until year 10. So again, if there's some better way to, what I don't want to do is we've got so much to do, we can't move. So if there's better ways to articulate that window for each of these, let us, do it at a summary level, because it kind of helps you see, well, what are we all signing up for? Because this page shows that, and there's a lot here. So if there's, again, not everything needs to be done in the first 3 years, so that's okay. Let's, there are foundational things though. Funding clearly is on the top of the list. So again, if there's other things here that we can better position from a time perspective to make it more achievable, that's what we want.
I feel like you nailed it on the head right there when you said it. There's so much in there. It's going to be very easy to say, yeah. Can we talk about some funding and flip the rest of the pages? I don't want that, because there's some really important things in there that I think we can do. There's also going to be some things like, hey, that's super easy, let's do that, and say we did something, and that's
quick wins are good.
yeah. But you gotta. I think that would help us if we. I don't know how that would yield to you, or how we get out of the mud. But there's as I sat here today, there was a lot. We talked for a long period of time, and we didn't get to the level of achieving anything. We're a long ways from that. But it had great discussion. It was very worthwhile.
Yeah, part of the problem is we've come a long way, like Randy said, but there's a long way to go. And there's so many things that need to be done. And you're trying to capture it all. You're trying to learn us, and we're all different throughout the state. And you're trying to compile this into like one direction. And it would be almost impossible, or at least a difficult task to do. I commend you on where you're at so far with us and holding our hands and herding cats, because that's what it seems like, I'm sure, to you. And we are in a transition between state control and local control. And nobody wants to say that. That's the elephant in the room. You know, a lot of us want to see it at the local level. Well, there's other politicians and maybe the state police don't want to see it at the state level because there's more efficiencies that way. And so we're in a transitional period. You're trying to show us what 3 years from now looks like when we don't even know as a team what that potentially is looking like. So I don't want to say it's an impossible task, but it's a very difficult task to say the least. And I think you're moving us in the right direction, and maybe we just accomplish what we can accomplish. You tell us, try to do these 20 things, and maybe we only do 3 or 4. You know, the big thing's going to be the funding and the formula, which that's my soapbox, if you will. And that might take us 3 years to come up with, you know, a proper formula. And that is so important. And it ties into all the other things that you're recommending, that if we don't get that done first, then there's no way in the world we're going to accomplish the other 19 things that, you know, we have on your list of 20. So I do believe it was productive with Michael's exercise today, if you will. It opened each page a little different than maybe we would have opened it. And he had some great suggestions. And I think we're probably 90 to 95% on the same page on everything that you brought up. So I do appreciate you doing that for us. I think it was well worth the time. I've often said, let's get together in a room and solve this in a week. And I know nobody can do that, but sooner or later, we may have to do that, especially on the funding formula. We may have to lock down to do that. So we've come a long way to go. I like where we're at today. It is confusing on several different levels on some of the comments that we made today, but I do think it was productive, and we'll be ready for the August meeting, hopefully.
Yeah, this is Bart. When we look at the measures, when you break it down even farther, there's 59 measures that we under all these. So there is a lot to do. One thing I would recommend you all do when you review this, if you find some quick wins, as Kent mentioned, some quick wins, something we think we can, in bite size that we could take on, because we want to get momentum going, right? We want to show these people we took your input and we're able to do something about it. So if you have some quick wins we can get done, you think we can get done early, show the people in the field that, yeah, we were serious, we took your input, we can do something about it. There are going to be some things that as we go through, we may not be able to do right now. But that's going to be part of the research when we get into the implementation plan part of it, where we're actually breaking down what we're doing every month. The catch ball, kind of like what we did with you before. Okay, next month we're going to have these things we need to make decisions on next month. So there's a lot to do. But if you can come up with some quick wins, that would help, I think.
Just to build off on that, I want to first thank everyone in the board for providing your feedback today. That was very helpful. And like Bart said, this is a catch ball idea. We throw it to you, and we require your feedback because, Michael, you said this is our plan, but it's actually the board's plan. So this is all of your feedback that's going to shape it. And what we got a lot of feedback on what to refine and wording, concepts, what to take out, and then one of the other questions I had is, did we miss anything? We have a lot of things to refine and change, but was there anything that needs to be added that was not captured that you believe should be in the plan?
I have another point there. I'm just kidding. All right, I'm gonna real quick allow for public comment on the draft strategic plan or any of that discussion. I'll do an open public comment at the end, but just in case there's anything public comment wise about the plan at this moment, and we won't be much longer, but I wanted to stop right here and allow for public comment on the plan, on the draft plan, sorry.
Okay. Really quick before we move off of strategic planning, I know that John and Kareen both said the 28th worked for them. I'm looking at the board members in the room. Yes, yes. Melinda's a maybe.
I have an ETSB meeting that night, so I could maybe reschedule it. But that's, right now, that's what I've got planned, so, but.
Okay. Okay. But if we were planning on a more reasonable amount of time meeting, would that be, no? Would that not?
I would reschedule because
Got
it's a 3-hour drive.
Yeah.
But it is an option for me to reschedule the meeting.
Okay.
So just.
Okay. I think Heather is still on. Heather, do you know if the 28th is a possibility for you?
Yes, it works for me.
Okay, thank you. Well, that would be a quorum, y'all. So let's all tentatively put the 28th on our calendar and hold it for a potential continuation of our meeting on the 14th of September. Any old business that any of the board is aware we need to discuss? Any new business? Any general public comments? I will take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second, Ralph.
Thank you, Phil. Thank you, Ralph. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Bye.
Any opposed? We are adjourned.